When it comes to playtime, never let your squad down. Unlock elite gaming tech at Lenovo.com. Push your gameplay beyond performance with 13th Gen Intel Core processors. Upgrade to smooth, high-quality streaming with Intel Wi-Fi 6E. And maximize game performance with enhanced overclocking. Win the tech search and head to Lenovo.com.
Lenovo.
Lowe's knows that free is just better. That's why MyLowe's Rewards is free to join. As a member, you earn points towards MyLowe's money on eligible purchases, get exclusive free gifts, and earn free shipping at Silver Key status, all on top of weekly member-only deals. Don't wait. Join MyLowe's Rewards for free today and start saving more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
This podcast is brought to you by patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. Head there to check out exclusive podcasts like Talking Futurama, Talk King of the Hill, the What a Cartoon Movie podcast, and tons more.
Cartoons from present and the past. Every week will be an animated bash. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! Maybe a short but mostly shows. We'll talk, we'll analyze, exploring as we go. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon!
Hello everybody and welcome to What a Cartoon, where we feast on whoop-ass stew. I'm one of your hosts, the toughest fighter, Bob Mackey, and this is an audio exploration of every cartoon ever. Who is here with me today, as always?
I may be able to talk, but I sure as heck can't drive. Henry Gilbert.
And this month we're covering the Powerpuff Girls episodes Bubblevicious and The Bare Facts.
The city of Townsville is in need of some serious pest control. And here she comes now.
And in case those drum loops didn't immediately bring the year 1999 into your mind, this episode aired on January 20th, 1999.
What a wonderful time as we started the last year of the millennium, and we're a year away from the Willennium.
What an exciting time to be alive. I don't want to get into the show discussion immediately, but when I put these on and you see the title card with impact font and that drum loop rolling, you are just zapped back into 1999. You have no idea what's about to happen. You can't even warn anyone.
It's so amazingly 90s. Like, it is the capper to the 1990s. It's the capper to, like, the Gen X guys and girls in their 20s making cartoons, making, like, their best TV cartoon. And it does feel like as I learned from the history, not unintentionally, it all feels like a rave poster come to life.
And yes, we're bringing this 7th year of What a Cartoon to an end by finally covering what's been a massive blind spot for us, the Powerpuff Girls. And I should point out that we've covered basically every show related to it, yet we have not covered the Powerpuff Girls specifically yet. So now the gap is being filled.
Last year, we covered Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, a patron request. And as I was doing it, I was filled with regret of like, boy, I really should have, like, this Craig McCracken history I'm doing here, this should have been done before. Like, and I kind of painted around him because I knew we would be doing Powerpuff Girls eventually, the long overdue Powerpuff Girls. And I think of the classic era of the What a Cartoon program, we have covered all the others that became TV shows like Johnny Bravo, Dexter's Laboratory, and Cow and Chicken, I think even. Or am I wrong? Maybe we didn't do Cow and Chicken.
I'm not even sure if we did Johnny Bravo. Did we do Johnny Bravo?
I'm pretty sure we did the Scooby episode of Johnny Bravo.
I think you might have dreamed this, sir.
Oh, man. Well, okay, then I'm adding that to my list, too. I've dreamed of doing the Johnny Bravo.
Yeah, we did not cover Johnny Bravo.
Okay, well, then someday we're going to do that one, too. But maybe it'll be the Scooby episode, maybe it won't. But you know what? I watched that one as part of my prep for when we did Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? It all jumbled together.
Is that one written by Seth MacFarlane, that Scooby-Doo
I
episode?
think so.
Okay.
I think so, yeah. So, okay, we have other catch-up to do in the world premiere Toon Zone, but this Powerpuff Girls is such a major moment, like, for all the guys we've covered so many times, including up to Hotel Transylvania, very recently we covered Genndy Tartakovsky's career, and this is a big part of it too. Like, everybody thinks of Craig McCracken, but this is also a huge show for Genndy as well.
Yeah, he's a major director on this. This is basically what he's doing after Dexter's Lab. Around the same time, they kind of overlap a little bit, then Dexter starts up again.
Yeah, if you look at the air order of stuff, Genndy goes from Dexter to this and kind of ducks out in season 3 of this as the production begins on Samurai Jack.
I mean, we could talk about our history with this very soon, but it's just so interesting to see just how much design is being pushed in this era of Cartoon Network. We have Two Stupid Dogs using the UPA style out of necessity, out of cheapness. Then it's pushed a little further with Dexter's Lab. That's pushed a little further with Powerpuff Girls. Then with the reboot of Dexter's Lab, it's pushed even more. And then Samurai Jack is the capstone on the era, where I think some people might think that it maybe goes a little too far into design and it's more about the art than it is about entertaining you or being funny. But you can see just how perfectly lined up this evolution is when you see how each show tags off from each other.
I think Samurai Jack pushes the envelope of it as far as most people are willing to go with it. Powerpuff Girls is a good balance of, there are many great dialogue-heavy scenes, but also there's many scenes that are just long and silent action sequences. And that's another reason I wanted to do these 2 episodes. There's so many great episodes to pick from in the original run of Powerpuff Girls, but this is a good balance of a very action-heavy one with a lot of quiet moments, but then a very dialogue-focused one in the second half.
And we also covered Dexter's Lab Ego Trip, the movie, on What a Cartoon Movie. And that's an example of a ton of work was done on Powerpuff Girls. Now they're returning to Dexter with the knowledge of how far they can push the design and the art and the visual storytelling even further.
Actually, yeah, it was a lot of the same folks worked on that movie while probably like moonlighting in between Powerpuff Girls, or maybe in the Powerpuff Girls like season sabbatical, they move over to Ego Trip. And another one that I don't want to call it lost media because it's very available, but it's definitely not on Max because I think not everybody liked it, but internally at Cartoon Network. But the Flintstones on the Rocks is also the same team doing this too.
And that's something the network absolutely hates, and it's only available on Internet Archive. I still haven't brought myself to watch that, and I know it's going to be pretty fun just in terms of the visuals, but I just never got around to watching it.
I remember liking it quite a lot back then because also it was official Flintstones media picking up the jokes that everybody had been making about them, one of which being like, aren't Fred and Wilma going to murder each other? If not, at the very least, get a divorce. Like, they hate each other.
They're identifying the undercurrent of domestic violence the original show never addressed.
I guess, too, when you take the Honeymooner style in Cavemen, but then view it through a late 90s lens of, like, the show On the Rocks begins at a couples counseling session. So if you actually took therapy to Wilma and Fred, it'd be like, oh, you guys are in a terrible toxic relationship.
Yes, gender politics in the caveman era, not good.
Maybe that's why the Flintstones. Here was the same folks who were doing the best cartoons on Cartoon Network trying to drag the Flintstones into relevancy in the post-Simpsons world. But the Flintstones brand managers didn't want that.
One of those fuckers was still alive, Hanna-Barbera.
I believe it was Barbera, I think, because one of their deaths is also a small part of the story of the production of Powerpuff Girls.
I should point out, though, we mentioned Ego Trip. It is available now for the first time in a long time. It's on that Dexter's Lab complete DVD box set that came out this summer. So actually, I had to pirate Powerpuff Girls. It was not available to stream in Canada, at least on nothing that I had access to. So I just grabbed a rip of the HBO Max versions. But because of me watching this and getting into it, I just ordered the Dexter's Lab complete DVD series because it was only $30. It was marked down. So I'm really looking forward to digging into that. There's so much of that show I haven't seen yet. And maybe we could possibly return to it for What a Cartoon because it was the first What a Cartoon we ever recorded. Not the first one posted, though. I
would love to do it again. I mean, there's so many great episodes of Dexter. And this week, too, with Powerpuff Girls, I had to limit myself from just going back and watching old Dexters, too, because really Powerpuff Girls is like season 4/5 of Dexter. Like, depending on how you count seasons. Craig McCracken has his own count for seasons. He says they did 4 seasons of Dexter, not 3. But was it a back 7 or was it a 6 and a 7 of season 1? That's kind of how it worked out.
Yeah, I'll say that watching this, I got similar feelings to when I was watching Rocko's Modern Life, weirdly enough, where, yes, this era of animation did coincide with when we were younger, so naturally we're going to be very fond of it. But it also happened at a time when so many resources could be given to a show like this. If you go to our interview with Peter Avanzino, you can tell just how much is being taken away from animators gradually to the point where most shows don't even have layout department. And shows like this thrive on layouts. You do your storyboard and everything, that's how it's written, but then you dig down into those drawings and you make them better via layout, and that department is gone from almost every show now. That is all done overseas where not enough time can be given to it, and the show is not being worked on by the same people who created it.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like an old man who says back in my day, but seriously, in the 90s, there was a story, multiple stories I found in this of the executives who greenlit Powerpuff Girls, patting themselves on the back, but I will say deservedly so, that they did give a shit about having good cartoons and putting the people who make cartoons in charge and trusting those people to a degree. By the end of the Powerpuff Girls original run in the early aughts, like, that time was kind of beginning to end, and it has just been slowly vampirically sucked out of Cartoon Network and every other place that makes cartoons in the United States.
Yeah, there is just so much attention to detail in every frame and every setup that I'm pausing this repeatedly to take my notes. And every time I pause, I think I could frame this and put it in some museum of modern art and it would look good on the wall there. It would not feel out of place. And that kind of attention to detail no longer exists. There is money for it, but they don't want to give shows the money for that attention to detail.
And yeah, I fell into watching about over a dozen classic Powerpuff Girls just in the last week since we had picked this to be our first one of 2025. And they all just came flooding back to me. Like, every one I watched, I was like, oh, wait, I remember this joke. Yeah, that was good. And, annoying my husband by pointing at the screen and going like, hey, look, oh, this is what they're going to happen there. Oh, remember that joke? Do you remember this? Because he watched it.
He did? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess talking about a personal history, I know I saw the original What a Cartoon short with Fuzzy Lumpkins, played by Jim Cummings. When this show came on the air, I believe I was 16 or 17, already thoroughly embarrassed that anyone would ever find out the kinds of things I like. So I watched a bit of the show with great shame, kind of tuned it out until I got to college and realized, like, oh, I have all these nerdy friends I met via Anime Club, and we can watch all these dorky shows together, and realize they're actually for mature adults who are 19, not these 9-year-old children you've heard about.
Yes. I think I was helped that my slightly younger brother, so when the short premiered, I was 13, almost 13. So I was a perfectly fine age to watch it then. And by the time the show premiered, I was 16, but my younger brother was 13. So he was still comfortable watching it. And we could talk about it with each other. Like, he would say his favorite was Buttercup, my favorite was Blossom. And I would watch it a ton. And then in the burgeoning internet forums, that's where I would see people point out, hey, this scene is a reference to Akira, or this scene is a reference to Dragon Ball Z episode, which was very rare back then. Now every cartoon by law has to have an Akira slide in it, of course.
Yeah, this show was made on the brink of anime being relatively unavailable, or basically a boutique item only richer nerds could afford. A tape that cost $30 in 1996 with 2 episodes on it. They are producing this as the Toonami boom is happening. They don't know that all of this will become just part of the fabric of media for all TV viewers.
This is made by only the biggest of nerds, Gen X nerds, who watched the limited amount of anime available in the United States in the 80s and 70s. And same with the tokusatsu shows that were big before Power Rangers became big in America. Like, this show is full of monsters that are like, well, that's just like an Ultraman monster that's 5% different,
Yeah, there's so many kaiju. It's great. And so much violence. I was really enjoying the graphic violence that they can get away with because it is so stylized, and the characters doing it have little flipper arms.
I think a key thing that people who make Powerpuff Girl shows that are not Craig McCracken and his friends making it forget is that Powerpuff Girls is a cute show and cute design and the stripped down design, that's all of it. But also, they beat the shit out of monsters and their enemies. They dismember them. They break their heads open and their brains spill out. Like, they are very violent.
Lots of decapitations and arms being ripped off. I will say, though, if you watch a lot of these in a row, you really have to like take a break because it does get kind of formulaic. It always ends in a big battle with lots of cuts of graphic violence. Graphic for TV Y7, but there is blood, there's puke, there's visible brains and bones. I was getting, again, wistful. Like, can we still do this? Can we just have a fun violence? I think it is catharsis, and I think we're forgetting that kids need that kind of thing.
Yeah, they don't. I think that violence is not there. You also that characters scream at each other like, shut up. Like, I was like, well, that can't be done anymore.
Yeah, characters are called stupid babies all the time.
Well, and this even still ends with like the apology. Like, this has an I'm sorry, guys kind of ending in the one we're covering, but that's not the point of it. And it doesn't feel like a mandate. It feels more natural, though maybe it was an editorial mandate or from the execs. I don't know. And Bob, so did you see the world premiere tune-in, the Space Ghost hosted thing? Because I was definitely there day one.
I think I did. I'm pretty sure I did because I had seen the short like you when it aired in, I believe, 1995. It took like 3 years for this to become a series.
Yes, there's a very interesting story to that. But to summarize again how I felt, loved Powerpuff Girls, watched it a ton, could tell it was for mega nerds that filled everything with references. By this point, I knew the names Gendy and Craig McCracken, I think partially because of World Premiere Tune-In, that they both were interviewed by Space Ghost, so I knew those names. And then when I could see the Gendys worked on Powerpuff Girls, that gave me extra interest in it. But I will admit that when I had, I guess, fallen out of Powerpuff love a little bit by 2002 when I was 19 going on 20. I did not watch the film in theaters. I think I eventually watched it on DVD, but the reviews weren't too great for it either, so I skipped it.
I regret not seeing that because I had a vague interest. I had friends who could have gone with me, but I just never went to it. But yeah, we're talking about Gendys associated with this show. Just watching random episodes, I recognize every name. I just put on a random episode. It's storyboards by Lynn Naylor, and I thought, Lynn Naylor's on this. Chris Riccardi has to be behind a lot of these. And yes, he is. And I looked up a Chris Riccardi episode, and it's great. This also sort of feels like what Chris Riccardi and other artists were doing towards the end of Ren and Stimpy when they were taking over and making it a lot flatter. So I feel like this is kind of tagging off from that as well, and you'll see some of those artists from late Ren and Stimpy on this show and other Cartoon Network / Hanna-Barbera shows.
Oh, yeah, you're totally right. Like, a lot of the game's crew got out of Nicktoon Land and headed over to the Cartoon Network Studios offices virtually across the street in Burbank, California. So, okay, how did the Powerpuff Girls begin? Well, I'm very thankful that because it is one of the most popular shows of all time on Cartoon Network, like, and one of the biggest money makers, there are many, 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 many interviews out there about the history of it. And there's even a fairly honest Cartoon Network official 2008 anniversary special they did on the show's creation that was like 40 minutes long. And they cover a lot of things. I was like, oh, wow, I didn't think Cartoon Network execs would be okay with them admitting this thing or talking about this thing, but they do.
I guess they were popular enough to be that candid.
It was the rare time where they also were still in business with Craig McCracken. They gave him a longer leash.
Oh, I should point out, though, unwittingly, we are doing this on the 30th anniversary of that original short. I just realized that.
It was entirely unintentional, listeners, but I was very happy when I saw that. Like, wait, world premiere tuning was when? Oh, yeah, this is to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Meet Fuzzy Lumpkins. Yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot of great interviews out there. I would point people to that 2008 special, but also there was a really cool career retrospective with Craig McCracken from about a year ago that was done at Gallery Nucleus, which is a really cool gallery in the greater Los Angeles area that I've been to see Rebecca Sugar's exhibition of like personal works. That was really cool too. So check that out if you want to go even deeper into Craig McCracken's whole career. We have covered him lightly on the Foster's Home, but I did want to focus more on that one, on his co-creator, the co-creator of the show, and his wife, Lauren Faust. Let's learn a bit about Craig McCracken. He was born in Charleroi, Pennsylvania, a small suburb of Pittsburgh, which I would be relatively close to where you grew up on.
Oh, yeah. We were so close to the border of Pennsylvania. I spent a lot more time in Pittsburgh than I ever did in, like, Cleveland.
And he was born in 1971, making him 11 years older than us. He was the baby of a family of artists, which he said was incredibly important to him. Like, he had an older brother, I believe, is 11 years older than him, an older sister that was 9 years older than him. They were both artists. His parents were artists. His mother an art teacher, his father an engineer, and brought his artwork home. And he loved drawing things with his father and his mother. It's a very healthy, we have a lot of bad childhoods we talk about sometimes on here, but it sounded like a very nice, happy childhood.
Yeah, I don't think he would be where he is without those talents being fostered.
Sadly, though, I said no tragedy. Actually, his father passed away before he was 10. That was a little rough for him.
Yeah, that counts. That counts.
Yeah. But yeah, he was exposed to loving all of the cartoons and comic strips and comic books that we all loved, similarly to what we love. He talked about that after his art teacher mother moved to California after his father passed away. And I think his mom has more than a little in common with the Powerpuff Girls teacher that appears in the show. McCracken said what he thought he'd be was a cartoonist, because he didn't know how to animate. He wasn't just pulled into learning how to actually animate and make pictures move. He wanted to be, he wanted to be Charles Schultz, or he wanted to be the creator of Tintin or Flaming Carrot. That was what he imagined he'd be someday. Though eventually he did learn that, you can create a cartoon show. That's a part of animation too. He said when he was looking at potentially going to Cal Arts, he said he didn't want to learn how to animate deers running in perspective. That bored him.
Yeah, all of these folks, they grew up in a very fruitful time. They were being released into the world as adults as the early 90s animation boom was happening.
They were very lucky with when they were born. I will say luck plus hard work is a huge part of all of these success stories. And it's hard to think of being luckier if you're a very talented artist, which Craig McCracken is, to then also be getting into the business at Cal Arts, joining Cal Arts in 1990, just as the boom of Roger Rabbit into The Simpsons and also Tiny Toons, and soon is coming the Nicktoons with Ren and Stimpy at the forefront. You're coming into a golden age, but you don't know it at that time. He joins at 18, and he is a great artist already. And he talks about how when he was in school, that there was one other guy who was an artist, and he didn't like comic books. And so he felt alone as this big nerdy guy, and he makes this great point in several interviews of well, you don't have the internet then. I can't be friends with other nerdy guys. And then here, I get to Cal Arts, and I'm meeting all the other big dorks who love all of the dorky stuff I love. And it was this magical moment for him. Classmates included, get this, guys, Gendy Tartakovsky, Paul Rudish, Rob Renzetti, and many other people we've covered.
What
before.
Are you telling me his classmates, or are you just reading the credits for the show?
They all stuck together. It seems like they're all still buddies too, which is nice. It's nuts to look at it as oh yeah, it's all the same pals. There was one of the funny moments in the official Cartoon Network released documentary on it that I was oh, that's funny that they actually talk about this, is another artist who was outside of that clique. It's him and Paul Rudish being interviewed together, and he's I was so scared of even trying to get in here because you guys are such a clique. And then Paul Rudish is no, we just liked each other. That's all. We weren't like the Cal Arts clique. Though they said that McCracken, they saw him as this goofball Shaggy character that's just with a big head, raccoon eyes, and long shaggy hair. I believe he dressed up as Shaggy in a couple of photos they shared.
Wow, yeah. That documentary you shared with me, it was said that he looks like one of his characters, and that's true. At least in his earlier days.
Yeah, he's aged into a silver fox, I'd say, but it's fun. Yeah, he looks like such a Gen X cartoony goofball in a lovable way, the most lovable way. There's a reason why, after you know what he looked like in the 90s, if you watch Dexter's Lab, you will see his face just drawn into crowds sometimes because it's such a specific thing.
Oh, yeah, I figured once I saw those photos of him, I thought, how many background extras are him throughout this decade plus worth of shows they worked on?
Though I'll also say, from watching some of those other pictures, Gendy Tartakovsky was or at least in the 90s, born to dress up as Fred Flintstone. He has Fred Flintstone face and chin.
He's just a giant rectangle moving around.
Yes. So yeah, McCracken falls in with these guys. They all are different talents and pushing each other to get better. They're all learning from each other. They all look to him as this incredible talented character design and overall art design. And he's growing as a boarder too. They are really really into him and his ability. And he also talked about how there was this interesting divide at Cal Arts, the cabal of ability. Not kidding. But at Cal Arts, he's...
Beanmouth University. I'm kidding, of course.
You know, the Craig McCrackens of the world, they would, by those assholes, would blame him as the inventors of Beanmouth, because Cal Arts, when he was there, he saw it as most of the guys at Cal Arts wanted to be Disney lifers. While meanwhile, his clique were the guys who loved Early Warner, UPA, and Jay Ward. They wanted Beanmouth Town and controlled animation. Another thing that really drove them in their early years was a love of the work of Sam Raimi specifically. They talk about how the editing on the construction of Ash's robot hand in the medieval times in Army of Darkness was a huge inspiration.
Yes, that is so great. When he's building, is it the chainsaw hand?
It's the chainsaw in Evil Dead 2, but
yeah.
in the sequel one in Army of Darkness is the one Craig McCracken specifically shouted out.
It's just a series of shots where it's like zooming into a thing and Ash grabs it, like a series of him performing actions, all these very quick cuts. And that's what every fight scene is in this series.
Yes. Yeah, they both loved that kind of editing and directing that Sam Raimi was so inventive with in the late 80s, early 90s. This finally got me to watch The Hudsucker Proxy. I added it to my list when you, Bob, and Nina, you saw it and logged it on Letterboxd, and then I put it on my watch list. And then when I saw Craig McCracken keep bringing up Hudsucker Proxy as such an inspiration for them, I was like, all right, time to I got to watch it. So I watched it yesterday. Yeah, it's perfect. I feel like a jerk, an imbecile, a schmo, as they call him in the movie, but it's so great. It's perfect.
Yeah. If I had to guess, they really were inspired by the intro where the main character enters the business and it's all of these quick shots of chaos.
That one, and also the construction of the hula hoop, that long sequence of it, which apparently Sam Raimi was the AD on, and it was his section. That section of building the hula hoop and naming the hula hoop, that was a huge inspiration for them too.
Yeah, people, don't sleep on the Hudsucker Proxy. It's good.
So Craig McCracken, what he's looking for is, okay, who's going to be my character? Who will be the original creation that will make me, who's going to be my flaming carrot character? And he thinks he came up with it. No Neck Joe. Have you seen No Neck Joe?
No. I just saw it for the first time via the documentary, and it feels like one of those characters that's going to be like Too Much Coffee Man, where it's like, where do I go from here? His joke is in his name, and it's like, what do I do?
After your first short, you got it. Though he had some success with it. He worked on it while in school, and it wasn't just a student film, though. It was part of the Spike and Mike Animation Festival, too. A big part of the growing golden age of animation. We haven't talked about a ton on here, but it was a big deal, too. And so he thinks No Neck Joe is going to be it, but he can't really make any progress with it. Then comes the moment, and here's how he describes how it happened. His mom asked him to design a piece of art for his older brother's birthday. He then looked to rave-style posters, particularly ones done by his pal Paul Rudish. McCracken wasn't making rave posters regularly, but he's like, okay, I want to draw a rave-style poster for my brother's birthday party. And he draws a trio of tiny girls in primary colors. And he was also partially inspired by the Big Eyes paintings of Margaret Keane.
Yeah, they noted that on the documentary, and I thought, this makes perfect sense. It is a parody of anime just by making the eyes as big as possible, but it also aligns with the Keane paintings. It's as well funny that this is parodying something that nobody had really seen in America yet. Only the richest or most connected of nerds knew really what anime was when he's doing this.
It's so great that McCracken, this is so McCracken's house style that he's like, what does this combine? This combines the kitschy art that Gen Xers loved goofing on, like Big Eyes and Margaret Keane's work, and then also anime. So it is this combo of the coolest cutting edge Japanese animation of the time in 1992 with the hey, remember those goofy paintings with the weird little girls with huge eyes, and brings that together for a cool raves feel.
Yeah, our pal Ian Jones-Cordy, I think, refers to that as Hanna-Barbera, where it's this kitschy 60s stuff mixed with cool anime, mostly from the 80s and 90s.
I guess also it kind of has the feel, he didn't reference this as a specific inspiration, but it also has the feel of those the happy smiling face, 70s design, or the Love Is comic kind of feel.
Yeah, or those drink pack mixes, the funny faces.
Yeah, the drink pack mixes too. Yeah.
I think they're called funny faces. Did you say funny faces? I apologize.
No, I was searching for that word. So he draws that, and actually the drawing he makes of the girls originally is basically how they are drawn when they are born in the opening every time. Like them standing together over the pot that they had been mixed in. Like that's very close to the very first drawing he did of the Powerpuff Girls. And once he did them, he was like, oh, this is it. Like, this is not just who they should be. No Neck Joe, trash can for you, buddy.
I'm sure he might pop up in the background somewhere if you look hard enough.
And McCracken, while as a student at Kettle Arts, he had the very ambitious idea that I'm going to make 4 shorts about this trio of girls who he are going to call the Whoop-Ass Girls. In the original short is Whoop-Ass Stew, because it's very 1992, everybody. They opened up a can of Whoop-Ass and added it to sugar, spice, and everything nice.
Yeah, it's no Chemical X. We're not really storing Whoop-Ass in cans anymore. It was a lost era.
Canned Whoop-Ass is bad for the environment, perhaps, too. I don't know where, obviously, a lot of these like tough guy phrases I know from a pro wrestler saying them, though I don't know like where the I'm going to open up a can of Whoop-Ass on you thing came from.
I feel like Rowdy Roddy Piper might have said that at some point.
Maybe he even gets that in They Live. I don't know. But McCracken's friends, who do help a little with it, they doubt if he'll be able to complete even one of them. He does fully complete and make in color one, though he only gets to animatic stage with 3 others. Though those are out there, he released them officially, and you can see early versions of him, Mojo JoJo, and the super combo fighting robot Dynamo X are all there in them. So much of what he was planning that would get into the Powerpuff Girls as a series years later is there in his student work.
Yeah, a lot of the villains are present.
Especially Mojo JoJo, who I'll get to him. And also, if you watch the original Whoop-Ass Stew, the design for the professor, who's unnamed, he's Dexter as a bald adult.
Yeah, he's not just the series of right angles that the professor is in the series.
I love Professor Utonian, by the way, too. He's great. So they're making Whoop-Ass Stew, starring the Whoop-Ass Girls. He completes it. People are loving it. He is showing it around town. He gets to show it at Nickelodeon Studios. And a young executive at Nickelodeon Studios, a junior executive, Linda Saminsky, gets to see it. She loves it, but she says that her bosses at Nick Studios, not into it, couldn't get it past their stage. So they couldn't do anything with Whoop-Ass Girls at Nick.
Yeah, I'm glad they landed on Powerpuff. Well, you're not going to sell a kid show with Whoop-Ass, but that's such a clever name.
They came to that name so perfectly, and to think that they could have been called the Whoop-Ass Girls, or they were called that, though not marketed as such.
It's so clever to the point where I've heard a lot of people just call the show Powderpuff Girls and not understand there's a pun in there.
It's as big as the Beatles. How you forget the Beatles is a corny pun, too. Which, by the way, Craig McCracken loves the Beatles so much that there is a insanely deep Beatles episode where every line is a line from a Beatles song.
It might go a bit too far, but God bless them for doing that. All of that was lost on me when I saw that as a teen.
When I watched it now, it was one in my last week of rewatching. There was stuff there I was like, oh, wow, I only get this now as a hardcore Beatles fan when Mojo meets Mojo JoJo, I think it was. When he meets the Yoko Ono equivalent, he actually does climb up a ladder and grab a magnifying glass and read something on the ceiling. It's like, you have to be a hardcore Beatles fan to know that's how he first met Yoko Ono.
And it's a good pun. It's a good pun as well. Actually, I saw an episode it wasn't about the Hudsucker Proxy. It was called the Headsuckers Moxie. And it was not about that at all, hula hoops or early 40s business. It was about a little brain sucker named Robin Leach.
Yes. He is a robbing leech.
Yes.
And then they just call him Robin Leach. Yes. So McCracken is trying to sell Powerpuff Girls, but in the meantime, to show you how good he's doing, while he does have some freelance gigs in between, including in 94, he will do the first pass on character designs for a Dumb and Dumber cartoon show that does not happen, but that's all he did with it.
That cartoon looks a lot like his work. Did they eventually use some of them?
I think so. I do think they used it in, like, that was something they did on those shows. Well, same with on the Jumanji show. Like, they basically just hire a great character designer freelance, and then they don't hire them to make the whole show. They're like, we got the character designs. It looks like a 90s cartoon show now.
Yeah, I never watched a Dumb and Dumber cartoon, but I always like the designs, and they look like they are from the Dexter's Lab world.
To show you how good McCracken was, straight out of graduating, he gets hired not just in like a starting position, he is hired as an art director on Two Stupid Dogs. Here's some small context here on that. So Hanna-Barbera, we've talked about Two Stupid Dogs before, and that's another one for like, whoa, we should do that in the future. Overdue. But Hanna-Barbera is newly purchased by the Ted Turner Company. While there, they are still doing the thing they always do, which is just rip off what's popular. And so here they are when it airs. It's like 3 years after Ren and Stimpy comes out. So they're like, we can do a thing about two dogs yelling.
Yeah, I need to go back to that. At the time, I thought, this is no Ren and Stimpy. You can't just show me a big thing and a little thing and, get by on that alone. It's got to bring the juice.
But what Two Stupid Dogs turns out to be is baby steps for Hanna-Barbera to slowly molt into being something better.
And I had no Secret Squirrel nostalgia. I'm sorry. I didn't know it was an existing character until Harvey Birdman came along.
Yeah, the only nostalgia I have for Secret Squirrel is from seeing him in the lesser in-between cartoons on Two Stupid Dogs. But I think the then new executive at Hanna-Barbera, he saw Two Stupid Dogs as his chance to be like, guys, we can do a little better, right? Because this is the way I'll compare it. Hanna-Barbera bosses saw the Muppet Babies, and they said, well, then we'll make Tom and Jerry Kids. That's a garbage show that's shit. When Fred Seibert and the other execs see the Ren and Stimpy success, and they're going to rip that one off, Fred Seibert, in his version of the story at least, says, hey, how about we also copy the trusting an artist to make a show and give them a little more leeway?
I'm skeptical, but go ahead. Yeah, they also made Flintstones Kids. I had the exact same opinion of that as I did with Tom and Jerry Kids. It was basically, I guess, sure, I got half an hour.
I didn't love the Flintstone Kids as a child, but by the time Tom and Jerry Kids came around, I had aged enough to be like, oh, this is trash.
Yeah.
Like, I really
And everything around it was so much better that it just stood out as being particularly uninspired.
Fox Kids was a terrible place. It could have done better in the mediocrity zone of NBC, though also Yo Yogi didn't do so well on NBC either. Isn't that crazy to think like it's just a couple years removed, like Yo Yogi into Two Stupid Dogs, or like the Yo Yogi and Dexter's Lab came out within a 10-year period for Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah, they really turned things around quickly.
This was the pipeline, as Craig McCracken puts it. So there's Two Stupid Dogs. They hire Paul Rudish. Paul Rudish is working on Two Stupid Dogs, and then he reaches out to Craig and says, we need an art director, and I think you're the right guy for it. I think that's the only way a 20-year-old guy out of college gets to be art director on a show.
Yeah, and despite how long he's been working, he is basically 50 years old. That's how early he got to start.
It's nuts, man. He was so young. Young guys don't, and I do mean guys, because it also, women didn't get these opportunities at all back then. But young guys, they don't get these opportunities now either. Oh, and then when he's hired as art director, then the creator of Two Stupid Dogs says, hey, do you know any borders? Because we need new borders. And McCracken says, oh, I have my friends Rob and Gendy. And so then Rob Renzetti and Gendy Tartakovsky get hired to Two Stupid Dogs as well. So this is a huge, nucleus for the future of Cartoon Network. They didn't even realize it.
I think they were both working on Batman in Spain, probably.
That's right. They were taking odd jobs on Batman. Two Stupid Dogs saved them from just being like in the Bruce Timm microcosm instead.
Yeah, and I guess Gendy did a bit of work on The Critic, too, before bouncing out of that.
Couple guys on here when I look like, oh, they did like a minute on The Critic, which I would bet, though this didn't come up in my research, I would bet that has a little to do with the Rough Draft doing the Critic pilot and them knowing, like, the Rough Draft Greg Vanzo people knowing guys from CalArts like Gendy. So Craig McCracken had great, though I'd say backhanded compliment to Hanna-Barbera when he started there, which is basically, he said, CalArts teaches you the artistry of animation, but Hanna-Barbera is a factory, and they teach you the business of producing animation, like budgets and schedule. In a way, it makes it sound like Hanna-Barbera, is a boring place. It is a factory. It sucks. But he did say he learned a lot he needed to know about making animation that he wasn't going to learn in Cal Arts.
Yeah, I was never a fan of Hanna-Barbera shows growing up. So I associate the swirling logo with just childhood depression and ennui. Just, I guess I'm a kid and I got to sit here on the ground and watch more of this.
Powerpuff Girls using the star swirl like that reclaimed it and made it good again. And so he's working on Two Stupid Dogs in 93. He shows Whoop-Ass Stew to an executive at Cartoon Network named Margaret McDonough. She then she likes it so much, she bypasses the entire developmental department and any systems they had in place for showing things, went straight to Fred Seibert, showed it to Fred. He loved it, and he gave it a handshake approval for 13 full episodes. He's like, you know what? This is the next show after Two Stupid Dogs is done. This is the next show we're doing. We're doing the Whoop-Ass Girls. But that's quickly rescinded because it is decided internally that the budget that would be spent on 13 half hours would instead be part of a larger system of just restarting the entire Hanna-Barbera studio system with 48 7-minute shorts that, time-wise would equal to 13 half hours of TV.
Similar name to this program. Unrelated.
Yes, yeah. The funny thing is they called it What a Cartoon. That's what Fred Seibert wanted to call it. By the time it debuts, it's called World Premiere Tunes. And then I think by 3 months later, Fred Seibert has his way and it's called What a Cartoon again. And Seibert recalls that basically when they announced this deal of okay, we're open. We want pitches. If you got a cartoon for a pilot, we want to hear your pitches. He says that the Two Stupid Dogs staff pretty much stormed his office immediately, all with pitches, and got to be at the front of the line, which that makes sense.
They did enough work in the Dogs factory.
And so Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Laboratory, as well as Rob Renzetti's Mina and the Count, those all get to be in the first run of the What a Cartoon shorts. And when I, again, looked at that list of What a Cartoon shorts, I was like, yeah, there's a reason these were the ones that happened. They are head and shoulders above most of the other original run of What a Cartoon shorts.
And I'm sure you're getting to this, but I recall some of this when I did my Ego Trip research maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago. People voted for these to see which ones would become a series.
It was, I couldn't find, yes, there was some voting and focus testing with kids and wanting to know what kids' favorite was. That actually didn't come up because basically Powerpuff Girls didn't need votes. It was liked enough by if you watch the world premiere tune-in, which I rewatched the whole episode of it, Craig McCracken wins in a very silly Space Ghost way of it's time for the swimsuit competition. And he's the only one who puts on a swimsuit. He puts on a 1920 swimming costume and wins, and they play Powerpuff Girls. But that's because Mike Lazo told him, hey, you're going to win, so do the swimsuit contest thing. So that's how much they liked it. It was decided Powerpuff Girls was going to be the first one, and so it won the world premiere tune-in. But yeah, the voting aspect didn't come up for Powerpuff Girls because it didn't need to win to get a series later on. But a big thing that they learned on Two Stupid Dogs was that UPA Jay Ward style. Craig McCracken shouts out Jay Ward much more than it's all UPA with Renzetti and Gendy when I see their interviews. But Craig McCracken also brings up Jay Ward, who also was his house style on Bullwinkle and George of the Jungle and those shows is also a very controlled, limited animation style that works wonderfully and holds up well.
I think they were also, I hate to keep bringing this up because I love the show, but I think they were also very inspired by Ren and Stimpy, especially the direction it was going. I read a recent article, and I forget who wrote it or where it's from, but it was about how Gendy was obsessed with Ren and Stimpy. He wanted to make a show like it, and that inspired the Dee Dee and Dexter dynamic. He wanted a small, angry, foreign-sounding creature to yell at a big, stupid thing.
Yes, you are very right there, Bob. I remember that too. You mentioned that in your research. I think it's on that first episode we did of What a Cartoon where you brought up hey, Dexter and Dee Dee are basically Ren and Stimpy as character dynamics. Blew my mind. I was like, oh yeah, of course. It is such a before and after. Ren and Stimpy was such a kids, if you didn't live through it, you didn't know, but it really was there was before Ren and Stimpy and there was after. It changed at the very least cable cartoons entirely.
Yeah, most people only watched the first couple of seasons, but the impact those made just changed everything for, I would say, 15 years probably.
Well, and also skipping ahead, Craig McCracken kept bringing up in multiple interviews I found a reason he did not take for granted working on Dexter's Lab or Powerpuff Girls after that is because he saw what happened to John Kay getting fired off Ren and Stimpy, and by not taking it seriously. He was not saying this from a like, John Kay got railroaded. He was more like, hey, I have to treat this like a job, and I can't just be like a piece of shit.
Yeah, we've covered, I don't know, 3 episodes of Ren and Stimpy at this point, but part of the John Kay story outside of all the allegations and the bad behavior is that he didn't value what he was given. He was in such a perfect opportunity. He had such the perfect opportunity and the best executives to work with, and he just wanted to spit in all of their faces, and he never had it that good ever again.
Well, meanwhile, Craig McCracken is very complimentary of Linda Saminsky, Fred Seibert, and Mike Lazo as well. Those guys believed in it, and I hate being too complimentary to any executives. I'd say even the best executive is still like, well, you're worth less to me than any person who actually creates a show. But a good executive respects a creator and gives them the space to make something, and also goes to bat for them, which is what these people did. And Linda Saminsky had this sad story about like the reason she quit Cartoon Network at the turn of the century around or a little after was she could see that there were new executives in there who just were like, well, what do standards and practices say? Or like, how does this get merchandised? Like, it was just all the shit she wanted to avoid.
Yeah, that's another thing that makes me wistful. This era of the few good executives where we talked about Rocko's Modern Life 5-6 months ago. Let's make a fun show that's not about selling things. It's just a fun show that can be gross, can be violent. It just will entertain children, and there's no other motive outside of that. Like, let's just make a good thing, period. People will watch it. That era is long gone, it feels like. Every executive is an absolute psycho who wants to throw every project in a tax fire.
Like Saminsky mentioned how she viewed in her widest-eyed moments of working at Cartoon Network, she saw their job as like, we're trying to save the craft of animation because, again, they went through the 70s and 80s of like shit, like total shit. Like the best stuff in the 80s were toy commercials that anime companies animated. Otherwise, it was just trash upon trash in the 80s.
Yeah, some licensed stuff was fortunate enough to have talented people working on it, like the real Ghostbusters, G.I. Joe, or some Ninja Turtles, but that was largely, those were the exceptions to the rule.
Here in the 90s, the execs who like dreamed of doing something better were getting to be in charge. It feels, if there are any good executives who can greenlight a good thing anymore, I don't know who they are, because all you hear about executives at the 3 companies that remain that even make original content in America anymore, they only want to make sequels, and then after they make a sequel, they'll probably write it off for tax purposes or reclassify it in a way that pays people even less.
Yeah, I'm sure there are some lesser executives in terms of being under the main guy in charge, but I feel like you answer to just the big guy now. There's no one allowed to have cultivate their own little fiefdom under that person anymore.
So Craig McCracken, it's 94, 93. He's told, I'm going to say it's early 94. He is told they take back the approval of a Powerpuff or a Whoop-Ass Girls series, and they are instead saying he gets to make one of the first shorts in there. And so he's working on the Whoop-Ass Girls short. He says that, like, I could not believe it, that they got to, like, the color stage of that first Cartoon Network short, calling it the Whoop-Ass Girls.
Oh.
Like, they get that far in it.
Wow, I guess it was a different time. They were asking, can we do this? And I guess Whoop-Ass was enough of a colloquialism that it didn't seem that offensive.
Apparently, the story goes that when Mike Lazo was doing a presentation to cable industry executives in 1994, that some unnamed Southern cable boss was like, "What? You're calling it that?" Like, and that's when it all came tumbling down.
Wow, to think that they almost got away with that.
And Craig really didn't want to lose Whoop-Ass. He loved it so much. He was like, he tried calling it like, be the Whoop-Us Girls? How about that? Come on. But he said while brainstorming and, all these thoughts, he says that independently, Paul Rudish and another of his artist friends, C. Cam, came up to him and said, what about the Powerpuff Girls, a play on Powder Puff? And he thought, well, wow, if 2 different friends of mine came up with it independently, that's probably the right way to go.
Yeah, it is perfect.
And unfortunately, that also meant no more can of Whoop-Ass that restarted them. That's where they came up with Chemical X, which then he had to be very defensive. That I was shocked in the official Cartoon Network version too, that he has to go like, this is not an ecstasy reference. I don't do ecstasy. We weren't doing that.
I never even thought of that. Usually ecstasy is called E, though.
Apparently there was enough talk then of like, oh, Chemical X, it means this is a drug reference they snuck into the show. Apparently he, at least from like people who write in letters, I think he was having to tell them, no, really, this isn't an ecstasy reference, I promise. So yes, totally unplanned, but 30 years ago, it debuts with the world premiere tune-in with Space Ghost, and it's called that because it was simulcast on Cartoon Network, TNT, and TBS at the same time. That's how much they believed in this program.
Yeah, I think I might have watched Dexter's Lab and this on TNT.
Boy, by 95, I don't think we had Cartoon Network yet, or we just got it. Yeah.
We didn't have it until 97, so I absolutely had to watch these on TNT.
I remember the magical day of whatever year it was in our cable system, we got Cartoon Network because it was like January 1st, I believe. And it was like there was an all-day marathon of Penelope Pit Stop. And I watched the whole thing because I was just so excited to have Cartoon Network. I don't care what it was.
It's mostly things that you hadn't seen before.
The Hair Bear Bunch, and there was promises of Moxie. We're going to see Moxie. This might have been some of the first Space Ghost stuff a lot of people saw. Like, this is early Space Ghost. I think it's the first appearance of Brack saying, "Hi, my name is Brack." So it's also the birth of Brack as we know him, too. And if you watch the other shorts in there, you know, there's Dexter, there's Yucky Duck, there's also Hanna-Barbera also even direct their own shorts. They do a Dino one. That's the joke. He's Dino.
Oh, I get it now.
And
because when he talks initially, he sounded like Dean Martin, right?
He was, yeah. If you watch his first appearance, which I saw many years later, after I was like, but Dino's deal is he just goes, but no, his first appearance, he's a talking Dean Martin impersonation.
That fact surfaced to the top of my brain like a scuba diver.
Well, you could watch a brand new Dino short in 1995, which felt like a conciliatory thing to Hanna-Barbera because clearly this start of the What a Cartoon program was like, this is the end of your era, old man. Go die. And so I think it was...
We're going to give you guys one more as you go out the door.
It's crazy to think that they were making these as contemporaries of like Yucky Duck or... but so not only does Meet Fuzzy Lumpkins debut there, but also with the first Dexter short and Yucky Duck. That's the first episode of the What a Cartoon program, or the world premiere tune program. It's so new that they only like basically staple on a Cartoon Network Studios banner at the end because production wise it is still a Hanna-Barbera production. Meet Fuzzy Lumpkin is rather interesting to go back and watch once you know the show. Craig McCracken only looks at it as the poor job he did or the things he'd improve now. Mainly he views it as, this is like a season 3 episode of a long-running show that does a bad job of introducing viewers to the main characters.
A lot of the voices are different, maybe all of them.
It's half and half. Though also, if you watch Meet Fuzzy Lumpkins, it has so much of what you love about the Powerpuff Girls, but also it is about, and it's MEAT, Meet Fuzzy Lumpkins, but it is more of a Fuzzy Lumpkin short that the Powerpuff Girls appear in, as opposed to introducing you to the Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah, it's more about showing off his meat gun than anything.
Now that you say that, Bob, that feels like a sneaky little joke they got there, I think.
We were really digging into how meat is funny in the 90s. Also,
it's crazy that one ends with Fuzzy Lumpkins is turned into ground beef and then they eat him.
I forgot about that. I just know Bubbles got meat hair in that short.
And Fuzzy Lumpkins is designed to look like that with the dealy bobbers on his head. Even the I forget his name. It's like Scuzzy something or whatever. A Rainbow Bright villain. If that Craig McCracken's older sister had Rainbow Bright toys, and he's like, I like this fuzzy guy. I'll make my own version of him. Who's a hillbilly voiced by Jim Cummings, who also voices the mayor. And the mayor in that is more of a Paul Lynde impersonation to not the Mr. Mayor we all know and love.
Yeah, I think with the mayor and Professor Farnsworth, Tom Kenny and Billy West respectively, they're going for the same impression, which is the Wizard of Oz.
You're so right. Yes, absolutely. And also in a non-returning voice, Kath Soucie is there as Bubbles, and she does a fine job, though she's not as great as the Bubbles we all know and love. Voice actor independent from that.
Yeah, I feel that a lot of the appeal of the show is the crazy voice that Tara Strong does for Bubbles. And the things they make her say, I mean, we're going to hear clips of it. It is a crazy voice.
Though the other two voices do remain the same from the Meet Fuzzy Lumpkins. Kathy Cavadini is Blossom, and E.G. Daily, Tommy Pickles, is Buttercup. I love the other Blossom and Buttercup's voices too. Buttercup's, rough guy voice or tomboy voice is really great. I love her a lot too.
Yeah, I'm a Buttercup fan. That's who I identify with and attach my ego to. But it is fun. Like in a post-Rugrats world, going back to watch Pee-wee's Big Adventure and the adorable Dottie, Pee-wee's not really girlfriend. Second she opens her mouth, it's Tommy Pickles' voice. You don't know what to think.
And the original narrator, that was another thing that drew me into first watching this Powerpuff Girls. I didn't know I knew, but when I heard that voice, I was like, wait, who's that guy? And it's like the voiceover announcer of ABC television back then, Ernie Anderson. And here, I'll play a couple clips here that will instantly make you go like, oh, it's that guy.
Townsville Mall, the quaint and happy consumer palace, is holding their annual jam contest. Let's join them, shall we? Don't miss the all-new exciting episodes of Star Trek, The Next Generation. The legend lives on. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, cats and dogs. It's the first grand prize episode of the season on America's Funniest Home Video.
Wow, so we don't get voices like that anymore, so his is very recognizable. I definitely remember those Star Trek bumpers.
Yeah, or just him saying like, tonight on Who's the Boss? Like
Tonight on MacGyver. There
is a great old Letterman clip that I found on YouTube that is like 10 minutes of him interviewing him, Ernie Anderson, and asking like, wow, so you're just the guy who does it all. Here, can you read this one? Can you describe this upcoming episode of Vegas? It's so fun. It's what made old Letterman so magical. And yes, Bob, the reason you say you don't hear voices like that anymore, I think is why we don't hear him anymore. I watched multiple clips of him recording and doing his job, like meet Ernie Anderson, the voiceover guy, cigarette in hand in every video.
It took 100,000 cigarettes to earn that cadence.
Yeah, sadly, I don't know how he passed away, but he would pass away in 1997, so that's why he's not the voice of the narrator on the show. But they make this short. Craig McCracken says they have a terrible focus group, like what he thought was a career-endingly bad focus group of little boys who hated the cartoon, who hated how the girls look, who hated that they didn't have fingers, who hated every aspect of it. And Craig says he'll never forget that one of the kids said, whoever made this should be fired.
Wow. God, that's pretty harsh.
He was so stressed out about it, he starts redesigning the characters. He's like, okay, what if I gave him fingers? What if I did this? What if I made it look more like other stuff? And he says that he got a great call from Mike Lazo, who told him, I hear you're trying to redesign them. Don't do it. We love this show. And I think the negative reaction is better than a blah reaction from these kids. And to Lazo, he thought it meant this shows that kids wanted to like it and were mad for some reason that they couldn't like it. And we need to figure out what that problem was. And McCracken later would use this as an example. After his show Kid Cosmic is not renewed at Netflix, likely because the algorithm said don't do it, talks about how executives believed in Powerpuff Girls and just stuck with it, even though a focus group of their key demographics said it was horrible. And guess what happened? Powerpuff Girls made them billions of dollars.
Yeah, it feels trite to say, but that used to be the reality of let's not listen to the ratings or the focus groups. Let's give this a shot and see if people will warm up to it. And it doesn't always work, but then you get big hits like Seinfeld out of that kind of approach.
Have the guts. Well, like literally no one has any guts. Like the algorithm gave them the perfect excuse. Like McCracken would say that boy-led focus groups would be the bane of their existence for years because despite how much merch they would sell, they would have these boy focus groups who would say, they would all say they don't watch Powerpuff Girls. And he says that one time they said, okay, who here watches Powerpuff Girls out of a group of like 12 boys? Only one would raise their hand. Then the person said, okay, everybody close your eyes. Now, who watches the Powerpuff Girls? And every boy raised their hand, but they didn't want to admit they watched a show called Powerpuff Girls.
It was just the word girl in the title that threw them off.
And so he thinks that Powerpuff Girls might become something, but it basically comes down to Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's. Both of them get second shorts. And it's decided that Dexter would be the first show. So Dexter gets put in production, and the funny thing is, while working on the shorts, basically when Powerpuff Girls short is being made, Gendy becomes second in command to Craig on that, and then all their friends like Rudish and everybody else, and Renzetti, they're all working on that. And then when it's the Dexter short, then Craig becomes second to Gendy, and they work on the Dexter short. And so when it's Dexter that gets the show instead, then that's what happens. They continue that on Dexter. Craig becomes second in command to Gendy, and he is very key to every season of classic Dexter.
It's great that there were no egos clashing there. They seem to love working on each other's projects.
It does. It seems that way too. Yeah. They are both at their best together. They are really great working together. I think they balance each other out as like in a good cop, bad cop scenario too, from a few production stories I heard. And McCracken, looking back on it, says again, like, oh, this is the best thing that happened because Dexter was basically like the last college course for him. Like he says, he learned so much about making a TV show, storytelling, boarding, fitting stories into the 7-minute short format of Dexter, that he says that by the end of the run on Dexter, they had learned so much that Powerpuff Girls was going to be a 10 times better show because of all he learned.
Yeah, from the opening, you can see how upfront they are with here's what everything's going to look like, here's how fast it's going to move, here is how confident we are with this premise.
And so they do, basically production is about 2 years on Dexter's Lab. And in that time, Johnny Bravo and Cow and Chicken are the next two original series on Cartoon Network. Dexter's Lab is winding down. It's reaching the 52 episodes. And he says that Linda Saminsky, the then senior vice president of original animation for Cartoon Network, big believer in Powerpuff Girls, she fears that when Dexter is over, she's going to lose all these Dexter guys to Nickelodeon or some other rival. She's like, well, how do we continue Dexter without continuing Dexter? And they say, you don't have to pitch Powerpuff Girls to us again. This is just the new show, and everybody who's working on Dexter, stay together and make Powerpuff Girls. So Powerpuff Girls is almost basically the rebooted season 4 of Dexter.
And as Powerpuff Girls is like halfway through its run, they say, we'll make new Dexter's Lab. In case you're getting bored with this, go over there. It looks different now, but it's just as good.
And Gendy's like, well, I don't want that either. He's like, Samurai Jack, we'll do that too. Please don't leave. Like, isn't that crazy to think that Warner Animation Studio would say, we're scared of losing a creative person?
Well, now they'll let them make an entire movie and not release it, which is the case with Gendy's movie. As of this recording, There's no date for that. We don't know what's happening with it. I believe the movie's called Fixed, right?
Yes, yeah, the R-rated, like, dog animated movie, yes. They told him to kick rocks, basically, see if he can sell it somewhere else, but we ain't releasing this thing. It's so sad. The way it should be, or the way I'd prefer it to be, that, like, in this horrible capitalist society we live in, that at the very least, you start with Powerpuff Girls being a cool idea that an artist wants to make, and then Consumer Products figures out how to sell that. Not Consumer Products wants to make things, and then they hire an artist to make the commercial for it. Mm-hmm. So all of Dexter sticks together. They start up Powerpuff Girls, and Craig and Gendy trade positions. Now, Craig is the showrunner and creator of the series, but Gendy is basically second in command, and the supervising producer, I believe, is his title on it. But basically, they're the co-captains of the show, Craig being in charge of it. And the senior spots are filled with all the other pals that they kept along the way, like Randy Myers, Robert Alvarez, Chris Savino, boo. Also, Chris Riccardi, yay. Amy Keatings-Rogers, and Lynn Naylor Riccardi. I think she is credited a couple times as the hyphenate, but Lynn Naylor.
Don Shank as well, we should call out. Very talented. He worked on a What a Cartoon short that I only saw recently in my adult years. It's called Buy One, Get One Free. It is just Cartoon Network making Ren and Stimpy, but it's as good as a Ren and Stimpy short. I'm sad that that idea didn't go anywhere, but it's a very, very well animated short. So look that up on YouTube. It's great.
That's where the cool bachelor guy gets a cat, right?
It's about basically the cats are left alone and there's a house party situation involved. And a lot of screaming, a lot of violence, a lot of psychotic things are happening. It's great.
And so when it's time to recast the show, or they keep the previously mentioned actors, I said, together, but 3 big additions to the regular cast here. It is the best, like, she got Bad Politics, but Tar Strong as Bubbles, like, this is her iconic role. If Raven wasn't so big now from Teen Titans Go, Bubbles would be her most iconic role.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that was her.
Now every kid still to this day loves Teen Titans Go and has maybe heard of Bubbles, but she really is so good as Bubbles. It was why I wanted to do Bubblevicious. I love her screaming in this one we're doing.
It must have been hard on her, just this high-pitched, throaty, scratchy. It's hard to even describe it because it is such a unique voice, a unique performance, too.
I got to think it was much easier for her in her 20s than it would be these days, like almost 30 years later. And also, a huge addition, Tom Kenny, who was only just beginning. Like, this is a few years into, I believe Rocco was when his voice acting career really began. And this is just a few years after Rocco. He's hired to take over as both the narrator and the mayor, who's really a different character than he was in the previous shorts.
Yeah, at the same time, he is doing this and SpongeBob, not knowing how they will be the most popular cartoons of all time.
Powerpuff Girls would be like number one on most actors' resumes, but like SpongeBob is just so huge. Powerpuff Girls is like shoved way down on the list for him. Also, Tom Kane, underrated part of the cast because he does a lot of great voices on it. But most importantly, he's Professor Utonium, who was a missing ingredient in those shorts. Like them having a father figure or a father in Professor Utonium to do cute dad jokes with, who's also like a space age scientist. He's basically Fred McMurray and Dave Seville rolled into one.
Yeah, it's great that they have the domestic angle too, because that was always funny with Dexter. The crazy sci-fi stories are great, but when he has to actually be a normal kid, it's also funny.
And they get away in the first, I think in the very least in the first episode, Professor Utonium gets to have the absent-minded professor, pipe for scenes, but very quickly he is not allowed to have a pipe, which I get it. Kids shouldn't see the nice dad character smoking a pipe. It's bad.
Not to bring up Ren and Stimpy again, but there was the character only known as Mr. Pipe. You would only see his legs and a pipe bobbing up and down. The unseen, the 50s father figure that would appear often.
That's right. All of his pipe movement is so fun. Yeah, that was great. I love that guy. Also, Tom Kane voices him. So he's both the sweetest father figure and also the biggest, weirdest creep in the whole series, too. And another major addition I want to shout out is Roger Jackson. He's Mojo JoJo, 10,000% my favorite character in the show. I love Mojo JoJo. He can never talk too much in this show for me.
Yeah, I love the high concept joke in that he talks like a bad dub actor who has to fill in too many lip flaps, so he's just very redundant.
It's so great. The redundancy is amazing. Roger Jackson is so great, too. He was on a hot streak when they got him. He is and still is the voice in Scream. That's how he's credited as the voice of the Ghostface Killer.
Oh, the Do You Like Scary Movies guy.
Yep. He's been doing it from beginning to now and even recorded the dialogue for Ghostface appearance in Mortal Kombat DLC.
Great.
And yes, the bad dubbing joke, which, they're cute. They're so in the past. There's like English dubs for anime and other shows have gotten so much better that these jokes don't work anymore. These jokes, I was so happy to find that in that Cartoon Network special because I was very lucky at the video store in Arkansas where I grew up. They had tapes of a totally forgotten in America tokusatsu show called Spectre Man. And I loved Spectre Man. It was an Ultraman ripoff, except with an environmentalism angle. That's the only thing about it that's special. But I got to watch it when I went to Japan. Sorry, let me get a drink of water. When I went to Japan last and went to the Hideaki Anno exhibit, he had his Spectre Man mask. He owns a Spectre Man mask from the production, and it was on display there. And I was like, oh my God, I actually get to see a real Spectre Man mask in person.
To have something in common with Anno. Interesting.
There's little else in common for me. No, but Spectre Man, his enemy in it is Dr. Gory. That's his Rita Repulsa, is Dr. Gory, gorilla mask guy, because also the show is a huge ripoff of Planet of the Apes 2, except they have terrible gorilla masks that can't move. And Dr. Gory, in the original Japanese, because he has no lip flap either in the mask, all he does is hand motions, and he is always doing hand motions. I'm doing them now to Bob, only he can see them.
It's very convincing.
And that's what Mojo JoJo does. So when I first saw this, I was like, wait, is he a Dr. Gory thing? And I found an interview where Craig McCracken says, yes, it's totally Dr. Gory.
Wow.
That's who it is.
So these aren't even mainstream references for the most part.
No, like Spectre Man, nobody's heard of Spectre Man. That's why I doubted, like, on first viewings of it, I was like, this seems like Dr. Gory, but nobody else has heard of Spectre Man, right? Like, but here, actually, I have a quick comparison here. Here's Mojo JoJo, and then here is the English dub actor for Dr. Gory in the late 70s or early 80s.
1 egg left. For a nutritious breakfast, 2 eggs is the minimum requirement, and I have but 1, which is one tie of 2. And it is 2 that I need. Curses. I must immediately purchase some eggs, for I need to have breakfast, and without the eggs I cannot have the breakfast that I so require.
You blundering fool. Spectre Man is right on your heels. And you lead him right to our invasion base. You ruin my plans. Go forth, Zeron. Strike terror into the hearts of all Earthlings. Destroy Spectre Man once and for all.
Yeah, Mojo JoJo is an amped up version of that guy, but I can see the definite connections between that.
It's great. I love Mojo JoJo so much. I'm so glad he's like the Joker or the Lex Luthor of the Powerpuff Girls. So also there's a ton of other LA voice actors. Like you look at the list, it's like, oh, it's amazing the number of people in there. Just 2 others I wanted to shout out is Jennifer Hale. Earlier in her career, she's Miss Keen, which only now did it hit me like, oh, that's why her name's Miss Keen, because the Keen Big Eyes characters.
Yeah, I watched the first episode to air that wasn't the short with Sedusa, and she does play Sedusa.
Oh, good. Oh, that's great. She's both sides of the mother figures in that episode. That's perfect. And also Jennifer Martin, she's Cerebellum, she's the character you never see the face of. She's one of those. And in the documentary, the boys in it joke about how they would get approval for one way that Cerebellum would look. And then when it came to actually drawing the character, they would always add more cleavage and curves to her than was approved.
Yes, I think it's fun. Because she is the most competent person in the mayor's office. I forgot how brainless he is to the point where he can't even read in this episode.
He has to be reminded of how to spell mayor. Yeah. They get away with all of the Jessica Rabbit type joke with Cerebellum, except she is incredibly competent and the real brains of the place. So maybe that's how they get away with it. But yeah, I mean, there are dirty jokes that are entirely intended in there. You can look up all of the like, wow, they got away with that kind of jokes in there. But the one that they included in that official doc where they admit like, oh yeah, we snuck this stuff in. It's when Miss Bellum is like mind controlled or somebody is pretending to be her that she's like, oh, you broke your pencil. Here, let me get that for you and guide it in. And she guides the pencil in the sharpener. I was like, oh my God.
I spotted something in the first episode that I clocked when I saw it originally. It's they're giving the professor things for his date. And Buttercup is like, and don't forget these. And she puts something in his front pocket, but we don't see what it is. And I'm thinking, this could be a condom.
Yeah, it totally was intended. Yes, absolutely. Yes. And the production followed pretty much just the Dexter version of board driven, art directed, and all layout, all done on the US side. And then it's sent to Rough Draft Korea, who do awesome at it. Like, this is great work.
Again, every time you pause it, it is something you could frame and hang anywhere, not just in the Museum of Modern Art. But we're also getting in on, this is one of the last cell-driven shows. And I feel like these UPA shows really thrive on that because you can really feel the texture, the paint, and all of those layers. And the thickness of the lines really means something when it's something that's photographed.
And same with the abstract backgrounds, I think pop a lot better in this era when it's on paint instead of early digital too. To show what a bunch of early 20-somethings were working on this show, it also coincides the production with the launch of the Nintendo 64. Mm-hmm. And so they would have Mario Kart 64 tournaments, huge time sinks. People were getting late. And this is maybe the famous production story of the show, to the point that they had the mayor wasting a bunch of time and distracted playing The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. He is distracted playing it. That is because people were losing time and sleep and being late because they were all playing that game.
They were all in the damn water dungeon.
I think that was what was keeping that. Nobody names that, but this is a famous story told by many of the staff in there. This I think tells you the difference in managerial styles of Gendy and Craig. So everybody's getting late on their boards. People cannot finish. They're getting behind. They call a big meeting in the office. Gendy, who apparently is not a gamer or wasn't then, he's like, what are you guys doing? You shouldn't be playing video games. Finish your boards on time. Come on. And then Craig McCracken, he's the good cop who's just like, no, guys. Okay, let's just figure out where everybody is, and we'll develop strategy guides together. And if you're stuck here, give a tip, and then we can all finish it, and then we'll be able to finish our boards on time.
Yes, he was like, we need to find all 100 Skulltulas together as a team.
If I was in their position, I would have said, if you can roll credits and beat Ganon, you beat it. You don't get to waste your time on like a New Game Plus or Skulltulas or getting every milk bottle. Like, I don't give a shit about that. You beat the game or not.
No Big Goron sword either.
No way. But yes, Ocarina of Time was a big problem for their production. And then, even once they defeated that, guess what then becomes their next big distraction? Super Smash Brothers. They can't stop playing it.
I was going to say Majora's Mask, but that makes more sense.
They talk about playing it on the big sectional couch in the Cartoon Network Studios building, which is also a big part of the production of Powerpuff Girls 2, because early in the first season, I think it is when they're doing so well that Warner, Turner, whoever, they buy the giant building in Burbank that will become Cartoon Network Studios.
As of recently, is a vacant lot.
Yes, it's depressing to know this story now because it only came out because the building was shut down and sold off in 2023. But when that was happening, McCracken recalled, when Cartoon Network told us they were opening their own studio, they asked Genny and I to help pick the building and make design suggestions on what we wanted for the interior workspaces.
Wow.
So I can honestly say this is a place that I helped build. It's sad to see it go.
Yeah, that's so depressing. Not to bum everybody out, but it is, when you watch a show like this and see the momentum it had, and everything from this era too, work done by these people, you think, how could the people in charge just let this all slip through their fingers and just completely tarnish their legacy? Obviously, things like legacy and, dignity and art are things suckers care about. Suckers that don't like money.
Yep. Yeah. If you're paying attention to that instead of the next quarterly earnings report, then you're a loser.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Why don't you go home and make something, idiot? I'll be over here making one thing, passive income.
It's so sad that Cartoon Network Studios, you didn't know how good it was till they got rid of it. And then on top of that, as it's being shut down, people online were still trying to say, there's still Cartoon Network. It's yeah, but it's not really, not anymore. But yes, in the good old days, Powerpuff Girls is how the Cartoon Network Studios was born. That's where it was getting produced out of. It's amazing to think that, Genny and McCracken, literally helped build it. It's so special. The main composer on the show is James L. Venable, who they credit for the opening theme that gives so much of the show's spirit, and a lot of the special orchestration for each girl and character. They give a lot of credit to Venable for that.
Somewhat related, he also did the music for the very short-lived Clerks cartoon, and Kevin Smith and others made a big deal, we got the Powerpuff Girls guy, because that's just how big the show was when Clerks premiered in the year 2000.
Wow, I forgot that. That was a big calling card for Venable. Man, that's nice. For all the good it did Clerks. But and so, yes, the original season aired 13 episodes, November 98 to July 99. A smash hit, the biggest original on Cartoon Network, maybe ever from a profit standpoint. I'm not sure. But McCracken says that it got too big in that he wanted to approve all the merch and any comic books or video games or any of that stuff. And he said he simply couldn't. He couldn't do it in addition to his actual real job, which is more than 40-hour-a-week job as it was.
I'm sure there was merch. It wasn't as visible to me as SpongeBob merch. That is the show, I think, that was just merchandise to hell and back. And I know maybe it was just in different departments I wasn't looking at. Maybe it wasn't being marketed to boys and young men as much in terms of the things they were selling.
Example he gave for how merchandised it was that when they did their episode where in season 2, where basically they fight Comic Book Guy, who is a collector of the toys and never takes them out of boxes. The rules are they can't actually draw the real toys because that would be advertising the toys. So they said they had to work very hard to make up fake merchandise for Powerpuff Girls for jokes in that because they had been already merchandised that much. They got their own video games, mainly on Nintendo portables. They were omnipresent on Cartoon Network. Even if you weren't watching Powerpuff Girls, they were in interstitials. They had tons of funny crossovers. I loved the Super Friends one they did. That was such a great one.
Yeah, that was back when they would make original little animated shorts for bumpers where a lot of cartoon characters would cross over with each other.
It was so cool. Like, C. Martin Croker worked on a ton of those, too. And also, they had a hit record as well, Heroes and Villains, music inspired by the Powerpuff Girls, with tons of indie band and classic rock bands. Like, you got Frank Black from the Pixies, Devo, The Apples in Stereo, Shonen Knife, and even a full version of the Love Makes the World Go Round song from the Mime for a Change, the one where they fight Rainbow the Clown.
I think I remember the Apples in Stereo music video for one of these songs because it was on Cartoon Network.
Yeah, they fought like a big blowfish guy with a bunch of eyes, right?
I think so, yeah.
I really love the Shonen Knife song about Buttercup. That was one of my favorites, too. It was also huge internationally. McCracken talks about how some of his favorite stuff was that he could find bootleg piñatas, which he's like, oh, that shows you made it. And also He said the best merchandise came from Japan, as always. There was an art book of stuff in Japan of Powerpuff Girls that he said he used as a reference for himself sometimes.
That's great. There was also that anime, too.
Yeah, it was so big in Japan that in 2006 it got Powerpuff Girls Z, that was an anime recreation of the series. And so yes, the group pretty much stuck together up until the 4th season in 2001, though of course some people left for the launch of Samurai Jack or My Life as a Teenage Robot. Like, they were spreading out. But it must have been doing so great that Cartoon Network said, this will be our first theatrically released feature film. We're going to do a Powerpuff Girls feature film. And this, Craig says that his mistake on that was that he was seeing it being sold as so pink and girly and childish that he wanted to get back to the dark violence of classic Powerpuff Girls. And he fears he went too far in the other direction.
I've heard that about the film, which is making me even more curious to see it. I've heard that it's very, very dark, and I hear that it is design above everything else. Jokes, entertainment, they just want to show you as many pretty things as possible with this new format. But I didn't think it deserved to fail in the way it did.
Well, also, Warner, he said, this is a podcast unto itself. He viewed it as one group at Cartoon Network okayed the film being darker. By the time he finishes the film, a lot of those people aren't in charge anymore, including Mike Lazo is now at Adult Swim and not in charge of regular Cartoon Network. And the new Cartoon Network execs say, this sucks. We can't sell this. And Warner Theatrical hates it too.
God. Yeah, even with the executives against it, it's so strange that in the summer of 2002, this couldn't have at least made $50 million.
Well, also, they really regretted putting it out in July. Like, that was a mistake as well. It would have done so much better in a slower month. But after that flopped, they still continued making the show and selling a bunch of stuff. They did 28 more episodes, wrapped up in 2005. But by that point, McCracken had moved over to working on Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. They would make a 10th anniversary special in 2008. And then, less said about it, the better. But the 2016 to 2018, they did a new series of Powerpuff Girls, which McCracken said he really couldn't watch because he's just like, this isn't for me. And he also felt that while he didn't hate the creative people who worked on it, he knew that it only existed because consumer products said we need more Powerpuff Girls.
And they made a lot of it, too. I was looking into just how many episodes there were. There's, I think, almost as many as the original series, possibly more. Is that true?
I think so. Though also, currently, none of it's on Max. The original show is only on Max.
Well, we don't have to watch it anymore. Yeah, I mean, I think I saw some clips of it, and it does show, well, here are the resources animators are given now compared to the 90s. And it's a drastic difference. I'm sure the people are just as talented, but they don't have the same tools to work with, and they don't have the same layout stage, presumably, that this show has.
And also, he said that, like, they weren't being allowed to be as violent either anymore, which made him sad. And then also, in another interview, he doesn't want to be too mean. He's a nice guy, but he does say that he got to be in a meeting for the cursed live-action pilot of Powerpuff Girls that was being worked on in 2020.
That's no good. 2020, I assumed it was going to be from that era of Cartoon Network where they were saying, should we do cartoons?
Well, this was going to be on CW. This was like, yeah. And originally, when he was in the meeting, he's like, okay, so is it going to be little girls playing? I'm like, no, like young adult women. Like, oh, well, that seems kind of against the character. Are they going to face Mojo JoJo and him? And they're like, no, those are too weird. That's hard to do. We can't do that. He's like, well, then why are you making this? Was his reaction after that.
So, well, the name has value. The end.
Thankfully, probably helped by all production stopping due to the pandemic, they didn't even film the pilot, so this did not come to fruition. As of mid-2024, McCracken is back at Cartoon Network and has been developing a new Powerpuff Girls series, but it is not in production yet, so whatever it is, I think he does hope to make it a bigger idea of the Powerpuff Girls world and not just like more episodes of Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this on the Foster's Home podcast, but he has stated openly that this is just the state of cartoons now. I can't make anything new. So I might as well just make this the thing I know how to make and that people enjoy.
If I can sell this, there were other interviews I've seen where he says, like, guys, you don't know how many brand new, amazing original ideas I have pitched all over town. They ain't buying it. Like, that's no matter how good it is. They don't want that. They want something that builds on an IP they own, not a new IP, even if they did own it. And he's getting to produce it at the only place that gets to still make these things for Cartoon Network, which is Hanna-Barbera Europe.
Oh, I was wondering about that. Okay. Wow. The European branch still thriving.
Maybe we can thank the amazing world of Gumball for letting it stay open and not get shuttered yet in this sad, sad era of Discovery. Yeah, there's Warner Animation that still does work on stuff. I'm not saying there's not Warner Animation Productions, but the closing of Cartoon Network Studios, the only Cartoon Network things that get to be made anymore seemingly get made out of Hanna-Barbera Europe.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I forget if we covered this on the Foster's Home podcast. He's doing a reboot of that as well.
Yes, that's farther along. I think they actually had like some clips of it were shown at, I think, Annecy or something. It's farther along. If there will be new Powerpuff Girls from Craig McCracken, that's not a 2025 thing, I don't think. But maybe we'll see some of the new Fosters in 2025. But that's the current state of the Powerpuff Girls. I do hope that people have come to appreciate them more. We didn't know how good we had it back then, is kind of the feeling. I want to give the movie another chance, too.
Yeah, I'd like to give it a chance, period. I wish there was a release, a streaming version, a digital download, something like that.
Yeah.
That preserves the aspect ratio and is in good resolution and everything.
I hope somebody has gone to Internet Archive with a widescreen HD version of it that they ripped off of some European place. Mm-hmm. And all of this Powerpuff Girls original is still very watchable, if you ask me. Another one I'd people to is Jewel of the Isle is one of my new favorites. The Trix Rabbit parody one is like, it rules so much.
That one I was not familiar with. I think it was a later one. It looked like a later one, at least.
It's season 3, and it's great. They parody 90s cereal commercials like to a T. I've never seen it done better. That's not the episode we're going to be talking about. So that's the history of Powerpuff Girls up to now, and maybe we'll return to it in a future podcast. But now it is time to get into a pair of Season 1 classics, Bubblevicious and The Bear Facts, when we get back.
Precious little Bubbles. She works so hard. Oh boy, don't do it! I'm telling the professor!
It's the Powerpuff signal. Let's go!
Hurry, girls, hurry!
Now let's fight! Not so fast! Everybody ready? Let's get him!
Powerpuff Girls, saving the world before bedtime. New, November 18th at 8 on Cartoon Network.
Coming up next, it's Johnny Bro...
Yes, Mayor?
Emergency!
What? Gross!
Get downtown!
Do we have to? Okay. Something's bugging the town. Let's roll!
Hurry, girls, hurry! We'll just have to see Johnny Bravo another time. You got a town to save. I'm sure he'll understand. It's the Powerpuff Girls, next.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the break for this episode of What a Cartoon, all about the Powerpuff Girls. I am one of your hosts, Bob Mackey, and I'm currently Mojo JoJo's vocal coach. And who is here with me today, as always?
Hey, it's Henry Gilbert. I'm dousing myself heavily in Chemical X, and we thank everybody for listening this week, our first one of 2025, and we're starting it out by covering one of the biggest Cartoon Network originals ever and a real hole in our history of the Cartoon Network series. We finally have talked about it, and we can only do the super in-depth animation histories on things like Powerpuff Girls because of supporters who are listeners just like you at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
That's right. If you want to access over 200 more episodes of us talking about cartoons, head on over to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons and sign up at the $5 level. And that $5 a month gets you access to all of our full-length exclusive miniseries episodes covering things like Futurama, King of the Hill, Mission Hill, Batman the Animated Series, and The Critic. And that $5 a month also gets you access to new monthly episodes of both Talking Futurama and Talking of the Hill. And the second you sign up, you get access to now 7.5 years worth of Patreon content. That's a lot of podcasts with us talking about cartoons. So if you have not heard those, you're missing out, buddy. And there is also a $10 level. If you sign up for that, you get the $5 stuff, but you also get one very, very long podcast once a month, only for patrons of that level or higher. And what is that, Henry?
Bob is talking about our premium podcast, What a Cartoon Movie, which if you listen in the free feed, you have heard previews of them. Like last week, you just heard the one for Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. That's us covering another very important hole in our history of animation. And you can hear the full, often over 5 or 6 hours long, discussions of these animated feature films that we've been doing for over 6 years now. I think we are at 75 now that we have done, and you can hear all of them, over 200 hours of podcasts, in addition to all the $5 things Bob mentioned, if you sign up at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And not only that, it is ad-free. You don't have to hear any ads like these on them, and you get them a week early. And this month, you'll be hearing us talk about another fantasy film, but this one from the aughts, How to Train Your Dragon, one of the best DreamWorks films, and it's about to get its own live-action remake as well, so we are going to be celebrating the original that is turning 15 years old this year in 2025. And we've got so many other cool ones planned, and you can hear all of it ad-free and all the $5 stuff too if you go to the $10 level at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
And if you've never been a patron of anything before, it's so easy to do. You just go to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons and sign up there. And then you can use whatever app or device or machine you use to listen to the podcast to listen to all of our bonus podcasts alongside all of your free podcasts. It's so easy to set up. And that's all happening at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
And so, once again, the podcast break is completed. And now, let's head back to our talk about the Powerpuff Girls.
Now, back to... Whoa, I forgot she can do that. Sugar, spice, and everything nice. These were the ingredients chosen to create the perfect little girl. But Professor Utonium accidentally added an extra ingredient to the concoction, Chemical X. Thus, the Powerpuff Girls were born! Using their ultra superpowers, Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup have dedicated their lives to fighting crime and the forces of evil!
And we are coming back in with the classic Powerpuff Girls opening, including the origin story with the play off of the What Little Boys Are Made Of nursery rhyme. Which I say that's sexist, that's the title of it. I thought the title of it was What Little Girls Are Made Of, but no, even though it's called What Little Boys Are Made Of.
Up front, snips, snails, puppy dog tails. Secondly, whatever girls are made of. Yeah. Whatever's happening over there. Secondary to the snails and everything.
Boys first, and they get the title. And McCracken says this was a huge part of what he did to reformat the show after what he learned from the two shorts. Though the two shorts do follow a similar thing to this episode as well, which is you learn that Bubbles is the toughest and meanest of the group if you push her too far. This is where we see Chemical X, we see Professor Utonium, a classic space-age parent, but also Dave Seville, And maybe it's because I've been reading too much Akira Toriyama, but his goals remind me a little of Dr. Slump as well.
Yeah, he's also the parody of the perfect 50s/60s dad. He's perfectly square to the point where he is all right angles.
Yeah, he's so great. And Tom Kane plays it perfectly as like the most wholesome dad in the world. We see the original pose of the girls over the pot that they were made in. And another great thing in the opening is that just through the music under the girls, you don't need dialogue. When Blossom comes in, it's like, this is the leader, the normal music. And then Bubbles comes in, oh, the cheery, happy music. And then hard guitar for Buttercup, like she's the tough one. And they also beat the shit out of the bad guys in the opening. This is so key to it. There are broken bones in this.
Yeah, exposed brain, because it's them zooming in, then you see the entire line of villains, and then they are all pummeled as this very short opening comes to an end. Through all of the quick cuts that you'll see, that's the staple of this series.
Cuteness and brutal violence. That's the recipe of how Powerpuff Girls is made. So we had the title card for Bubblevicious. Very simple. We're not getting any Batman the Animated Series full painted title cards on these.
No, again, I love the drum loops. Someone's playing around in the Fruity Loops program that many of us had on Windows, making drum fills and stuff like that. But we're back to 99. Impact font is not something you stick on a meme anymore. Or maybe 10 years ago you would stick on a meme. I think Elon Musk is still doing that.
Oh, right. It's actually, yeah, you can chart this just like you can chart the Batman the Animated Series into the WB years, because when they get to WB, it's also just impact font on the screen for a title.
Yeah. Did Dexter's Lab have title cards? I thought I remember
they did.
It had title cards, at least at first.
I think at least the earliest episodes they did. But yeah, this is Bubblevicious. It's boarded by Mike Stern, who did a couple episodes of Powerpuff Girls. He has a kind of sparse IMDb. I think he must work in other fields, because his IMDb is just like, oh, he did like a few Dexters, a few Robot Jones. He worked on Shrek 4. Like, it's not a very full one for Mike Stern, but he definitely is of the same generation as all the other guys. Art direction on it is Craig Kellum, who did a ton of work on the show. He is another Cal Arts alum, same years as the other guys. He did a ton of work on this show. He was a supervising director on Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, and he moved over to theatrical a little after that. Tons of work on DreamWorks and Warner and Disney. Like, does a ton of character design to this very day. He has credits on 2024 movies.
I did a little gum research. I'm not sure if you did any gum research, Henry, because this episode is obviously named after the Bubblevicious brand of bubble gum. And this is definitely a Gen X reference, because I was shocked to find out that Bubble Yum was the first soft bubble gum, and it hit the market in, I believe, 1974. Bubblevicious was a competitor, 1977. It is now currently only available in one flavor, and that is watermelon. The kids are not chewing gum anymore. They're vaping.
Wow. Well, thank you. I did not know. Even though the title is so clear, I did not think of Bubblevicious at all when I was writing down Bubblevicious all these times. Thank you.
Yeah, so like when Craig McCracken was 6, it's like, here's a new product. It's called Bubblevicious.
All of these creators, it is a lot of like, what did I do in my childhood? Let's relive my childhood in this. And that is, yeah, now when you mention it, I think back to when I would read vintage comics, when I'd buy an old issue of Amazing Spider-Man from that era, like bubblegum ads like that, the soft bubblegum ads like that were huge in those.
Yeah.
Like also for Hubba Bubba, that was another big one.
Those ads were like, imagine blowing a bubble. It's possible now. And when I was reading those old comics in 1990, I thought, what century is this? How long has gum been around?
Bubblegum will no longer cut your cheek when you bite into it now. You know, fruit stripe gums, that's gone now.
Good. Good. Wipe it from the planet.
What will that mascot do, Bob?
He could still be on kitschy T-shirts or whatever.
And McCracken has a directing credit on every episode. I think that was just the format. Like, that was on Dexter as well. I believe Gendy had co-directing or pure directing credit on every episode. Maybe that was structurally how the supervising director worked on Cartoon Network productions back then. But this is co-directed with Gendy. And based on how much silent violence is in this, I think this is a lot of Gendy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's most of Samurai Jack is dialogue-free violence. It's extremely stylish.
And leave it to the nerds to start this episode with basically a holodeck or danger room scenario here.
Oh yeah, I did write down Danger Room.
I definitely think it's more Danger Room. It's for training and all that, but the lines on the wall also feel like, you know, holodeck from Star Trek.
The holodeck is for training your mind.
Or for having sex, if you're dirty Geordie LaForge.
Training your penis.
Yes. Obviously that's what nerds' first thought would be with the holodeck. Would be like, oh, it's a hard light thing I could have sex with, right? Like, that's why it's only accessible by Starfleet's finest.
You don't want to go into that thing barefoot is what I'm saying.
These have been jokes told for 30 years about the holodeck. But
there's nothing new.
And yes, the action that they start with, I wonder if they also, it's just a simulation thing, is how they get away with showing Buttercup not just beat up a slug monster, but turn it into pulp, like punch it until it is goop.
It's all of the hallmarks of a Powerpuff Girls fight scene. And I actually have the video open because this is so visual. I need to look at it for reference. But it's all of the violence, the quick cuts to different punches and kicks and attacks, but also seeing the same thing happen 3 times from different angles.
Oh,
when she bursts out of the slug. Yeah.
Gendy loves that repeating of I think definitely it was inspired by Hong Kong action films, especially Jackie Chan. He loved editing in that style of no, see the punch 3 times in a row from 3 angles, or let you know that this stud was so cool we filmed it from 3 angles and we're just going to repeat it and not care about continuity or going backwards. The sound effects too, I love they always just pulled from the Hanna-Barbera bucket of sound effects.
Yeah, the sound design is great. It's not quite as noisy as the Nickelodeon shows.
Well, because also it was the Gendy and McCracken style of leaving viewers with some silence to stew in and actually appreciate the art. Instead of when we did Rocko's Modern Life, it was just
yeah, everything is farting. Every motion produces a fart. Every prop makes a fart noise.
And yeah, you mentioned him earlier, but Ian Jones-Quartey, he loved all these sound effects so much that they are peppered throughout OKKO. I think the character Rad, which Ian also voiced, most of the time he uses his powers make the same sounds as a Powerpuff Girls punch or laser. So we see that Buttercup goes too far, has to be, I think you got him, honey, by Utonium. And meanwhile, Blossom is being her usual Leonardo self of I think you went too far.
I forgot how Blossom is kind of annoying in this show, especially in the second part. You really learn how she's a little smug. I don't want to pause and point out oh, this looks so good, but just all the touches. They're in the danger room monitoring room. Everything has a new color palette. All the characters are in this darker room, so they're a little bluer. But then if they're in front of the console, they're lit by this pink light. Again, these are all of these touches that a modern executive would say, don't bother. Why do they have to be different colors? This requires a lot more time and attention. What if somebody screws it up overseas?
Oh, this took 3 extra passes to get that, pink shadowing outline on these characters. No. Or they might say, kids will be confused. This looks different. Don't do that.
Yeah. When they're blue, they don't look like the thing you can buy in the store, so don't do this.
The algorithm tells us kids will buy these toys 7% less if they're a different color. I love the color. I mean, the color design on this show every second is just amazing. I love that it insults you with pink. So much pink and rainbows. The Powerpuff Girls are made of rainbows. Them flying around is like neon rainbows in the sky. It's beautiful.
Their beds are rainbow. They all fit neatly into each compartment.
It's adorable. They do. I was saying I now am probably older than they wrote Professor Utonium to be in the show, but I was having his oh reaction. Bubbles then is extra impressed with this, and it's going to be her turn next in our first clip.
Yeah, Buttercup. Buttercup. Okay, stop. Buttercup. Buttercup! I think you got him, honey. Come back in now.
How was that? Well, I thought you went a little too far, when... Man, Buttercup, you are hardcore. There was this part where you're stuck inside the slug, and it was all gross and stuff, and then splat, pow, pow, you're hitting it, and then you were slamming it on the ground and punching it and kicking it, and it was all done and stuff, and...
Bubbles?
Yeah?
It's your turn.
Okay, I'm ready!
Oh, ain't she cute?
Professor, don't forget to...
Don't worry, Blossom. I know. Danger level 9 is way too much for our little Bubbles. Ready? Here you go.
All 3 of the girls, the actors for the girls, I'm not calling these adult women girls who play them, all of them have such good chemistry together. It feels like they recorded together a lot.
It does feel with all the overlapping dialogue here.
The way Buttercup keeps going I know. Bubbles is just the excitable kid and then this, and then this, and then this. And Strong is playing that so good as Bubbles too. And this idea of being hardcore, that is very 90s. Everybody is treating Bubbles like a baby, which this also is like, this is good storytelling. They find a starting point for, like, okay, what's the thing you remember as a kid? Like, oh, I remember when my dad dated somebody I didn't want them to, or I remember being told it's time to go to bed, or I remember wanting to be friends with the bad kids, like all this stuff. And here it's like, you remember being told, like, you're too young to do that. Like, I am not a baby. That's where this comes from.
It's very universal, especially if you're a precocious kid who would get mocked a lot for having moderately adult tastes.
Yeah. I mean, Bubbles is the baby of the group, even though they all are born at the same time, but they always write her to be like so little and babyish, and she can't take it. They send out a little robot that she could easily defeat, and she knows they're taking it easy on her. And then when she's distracted, she gets zapped from behind, so they think, oh yeah, this has been justified. Like, we know you can't take it.
I like that her danger room setting is just empty living room with a welcome mat.
Yeah.
Instead of this burning city that Buttercup was in.
Bubbles is trying to say, I'm just as strong and tough as them. And even when she gets mad and says, it's not fair, even then they're like, she's so cute when she gets all pouty. Like, even that they don't take seriously. They get in their adorable bed with their adorable octopus lamp next to it. So that's very cute in 70s too.
Yeah. I mean, this does feel like a reflection of the bedrooms that they saw growing up.
This also is good continuity because, not that the show operates in like, linear continuity, but in an early episode, Boogie fights about going out after dark. Bubbles is scared of the dark. Like, she is like, I don't want to. Like, so this is them playing up on like, yeah, we all know Bubbles is scared of the dark.
It's a night, again, all this attention to detail. The light from the hallway is mostly hitting her, but there's still a little bit of the light on the other two girls' faces that requires a lot of attention to detail, making sure nobody screws anything up that you're not going to see on a newer show.
And her sisters are rubbing it in. Like, I mean, yeah, I had this feeling as a sibling as well growing up of just like that. I was like, no, I can do this on my own. And my brother would joke like, no, you can't. And my mom or dad would laugh along. I would have then angry inner monologues just like Bubbles here. And this is really where like Tara Strong owns it in this inner monologue.
Now I want you girls to go right to sleep. You've had a hard day of training and you need your rest. Good night.
Professor?
Yes?
Don't forget to leave the hall light on for Bubbles. That's okay, Professor. I'm not afraid of the dark anymore.
Oh, Bubbles, you are so precious, acting all brave.
Yeah, everyone knows you're the scariest. I'm not.
All right now, good night, girls.
It's not fair. I'm just as tough and strong and mean as Buttercup and Blossom, but they just don't believe me. They'll treat me like a baby. I'll show them. I'll prove that I can be hardcore.
Hearing that cute baby voice say hardcore, like, great.
I'm sure that was memed on early internet stuff.
Oh,
it does feel like an early catchphrasey kind of thing, or just something that would be spread around, something that's fun to quote.
Yeah, I bet PPG was all over. It's hard for me not to just write down PPG a ton of my notes because that's, I feel like, the shorthand that was used on every forum back then to talk about the show. Yeah, so Bubbles gets out of bed, secretly goes to the danger room, and just to let you know what type of nerds are making this show, we get our first, not the last, joke about turning a dial all the way to 11.
Yes, Spinal Tap.
It hadn't been overdone at this point yet. To say that it had been referenced to other things though too. If you haven't seen This Is Spinal Tap, the joke is that it typifies the wonderful stupidity of rock and roll, which is this doesn't go to 10, it goes all the way to 11. It's louder than 10. And then Rob Reiner's character says, why don't you just make 10 louder? It's like, but no, this is 11. Like, it's 11. That's bigger than 10. Classic comedy. So when she puts it to 11, we have a long dialogue-free, dark, violent scene.
Yeah, I'm rewatching it now. I watched it a few times when I was doing my initial prep, and eyeballs are flying out, brains are exploding, limbs are being ripped apart, there's pools of blood and slime, and everything has shadows on it. All of the beam attacks and fire have a separate pass to do, the lit effect behind them. It's very, very complicated, even though the character designs seem very simple.
She even wipes blood from her mouth, too. Like
Yeah,
Bubbles
it's
bleeds.
It's like the Joker in Mask of the Phantasm.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, this is so Samurai Jack, all of this like violence, like in the fast cuts, like this is exactly how a Samurai Jack fight goes too. Like, and except it's Bubbles doing it and her like screams of anger. Like, and also when of all the violence in the one that shocked me the most was she rips a horn off of one of the guys and then throws the horn through the mouth of another one.
And it comes out the back of his head.
That has to be they only got away with it because it's a simulation, right?
I guess so. And also, it's these little girls with like nubs that are doing all the action.
It's so good. It's all just like amazing. And it's Bubbles then just screams like, who else wants some? Like she's been reborn in the fire. So we head over to Pokey Oaks, which is the fun setting of their kindergarten class. It was another of my favorite action scenes in the show from the episode where they fight Princess, because I loved the first Princess episode because it basically is just a short form version of Project A-ko. Like it's the badass girls and then the rich kid who wants to buy superpowers and eventually makes a super suit and they all fight each other. That's the same plot as Project A-ko, though no lesbianism in it. But then also it has like shot for shot bits from a Majin Buu fight in Dragon Ball Z as well.
I have not seen this one.
Oh, look it up. If you look up just screenshots of Powerpuff Girls Dragon Ball Z, there's a shot where a laser is shot at Blossom. She tilts her head slightly for the laser to miss, and it is like shot for shot the scene from Dragon Ball. But in this case, they are playing Duck, Duck, Goose. And do kids still play Duck, Duck, Goose on today's playground? Sound off, parents. I'd like to know.
They probably have an app.
It's still a good way to get kids to be active. Like same with like musical chairs.
There's often like tackling involved, though. It could be too full contact these days.
I guess actually the joke in this episode is why you wouldn't get to do it, would you? Because some kids take it too. I mean, I like Blossom taunts Bubbles a little bit, and that pushes Bubbles to the edge, and she plays too rough. And this is where Bubbles shows off her new way of thinking.
Relax. It's just a game. What do you want, man?
Yes, I'm stuck in the middle of this huge traffic jam, and I'm going to be late.
And I forgot that the talking dog, who is the cause of the traffic jam, is in the first episode.
Yes. Yeah, he's right there in Meet Fuzzy Lumpkins. Like, boy, these guys are in a real jam.
Oh, yeah, and he's the first one to air, too, when in the first episode, everyone's being turned into dogs.
Oh,
so
yeah.
all new designs, which are great, by the way.
I love all their dog. Yeah, Monkey See, Doggy Do, which also, that leads to a great season 3 episode where they fake like it's a rerun of that episode for viewers, and then the Powerpuff Girls realize they're in a rerun, and they confront Mojo, and he says like, oh, well, here I'm going to re-show you what happened last time, and I'm not going to do that this time. The talking dog is great, and he is the one who can't drive and is holding it up. Also, the way she hits that high pitch on cute little Bubbles, like that is a throat ripper.
Yeah, only she could do this. I don't know what even the new Bubbles sounded like, if she was going for the same kind of performance.
I wonder, yeah. I should check, because I think they recast all 3 roles for the 2016 version of it. But, I mean, I saw that there was a Teen Titans Go where they met the new Powerpuff Girls, and one of the eerie bits is like Raven is in the same shot as Bubbles as a reference, but Raven is still Tara Strong, but Bubbles is not. Also, the hotline based on that same Fisher-Price phone that was a character in Toy Story 3.
And a staple in kindergartens, preschools, up probably through the early 90s. There was one of these in the giant toy chest at my kindergarten or something like that.
As you get older, you learn that it can also be used as a weapon because it's very solid.
Yeah. They, I guess there's a smartphone version of this now.
Also, the reason they picked the Fisher-Price phone thing is another big inspiration for McCracken, both in color design and tone of the show, is Adam West's Batman as well.
I can see that.
So, I mean, the mayor calling him on the hotline, and they get the... There was another episode I watched where they just did a full parody of Batman reasoning out a riddle with the three girls talking out loud like, but it doesn't, and they just pace around the scene. It's really great. But yes, it's the talking dog. He can't drive, this idiot. And here Bubbles is about to meet the cute talking dog, but she isn't so happy to see him.
Well, I may be able to talk, but I sure as heck can't drive. Oh, hi, Bubbles. How are you?
No, Bubbles, have mercy.
Mercy is for the weak! Bubbles! Have you lost your mind? This isn't the Bubbles we know. The Bubbles you know is gone! I'm hardcore now! But, you're going overboard. That's not the Powerpuff way. Forget the Powerpuff way! I'm doing it my way. I can handle Townsville myself! What? But we're a team. We look out for each other. I don't mean to burst your bubble, girls, but from now on, I fly solo!
Whoa! Sister's doing it for herself. Let's hope she knows what she's doing.
She's really brutalizing this dog. What I noticed they're getting away with is a lot of punches to the face.
Yeah, and sometimes they cut on the impact with a white screen, but they don't do it every time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, also, I feel like even by season 3, if they'd have a bit of, and then Bubbles beats up an innocent dog, even then standards and practice would be like, that's a little mean.
She punches a dog 3 times in the face and throws it to the ground, and then as it's cowering, she's about to punch it again.
She may have killed him with the mercies for the weak, which I think that comes from many places, but I associate it with like Karate Kid, right?
Is that from one of the sequels? I haven't seen that movie in a while.
I thought it was like, isn't it the like slogan for Cobra Kai, like for the bad guy dojo?
Sounds like it could be.
And we hear it's not the Powerpuff way, and Bubbles is sick of this stuff, and she flies away, and that's also, we get another reference to another 70s sing, Sisters Doing It for Themselves, as sung by Lisa Simpson.
Yeah, check out our The Yellow Album podcast we did for Talking Simpsons. It's very fun.
And now we get our second long silent montage of the episode, which, again, shows you it's a Gendy one.
Yeah, the thing about, so she's like punishing a bunch of evildoers who are doing things like stepping on the grass, parking where there's a no parking sign. The thing that's very Gendy is the guy who's about to litter. He's about to drop his gun wrapper, but he falls to the ground based on her attack before the wrapper can hit the ground. That feels totally Samurai Jack.
Oh, yeah. I also love the detail of the guy stepping on the grass is that he steps on a single blade of grass. Like,
yes.
Not really any grass.
And unwittingly, he's not doing this to violate any laws or to be a stinker. He's like, oh, and then he's beaten savagely.
At the end of the long montage of her beating the shit out of regular people, she is then like on top of a rooftop covered in shadow, lightning behind her. Like, that is so a... Gendy also loves Frank Miller, and that is a Frank Miller Batman shot if I ever seen one.
Yeah, it struck me as Batman the Animated Series, but I'm sure they were drawing the Frank Miller well for those shots.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And then very randomly, Mojo JoJo is able to kidnap her. It is part of the story. When she says later, he'd have never caught me if I'd been with you guys. It's not like, oh, she needs to be captured by Mojo now. There's no explanation for it.
Yeah, the point is they need each other as a team.
And so we cut to Bubbles in captivity. And this is another thing Gendy loved. He loved this death trap so much that the exact thing that's holding her in place is also an ego trip.
Oh, wow. And this is the same thing you have to mash a button to fight against in Metal Gear Solid.
Yes, maybe, which would have been on video games the year before, or just the game would have come out like 3 months before this?
Just 3 months before it, yeah.
And actually, I guess in both cases, it's about the wherewithal of withstanding torture, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's torture in this kid's cartoon, too.
That's actually really dark, as I say it out loud. And in Ego Trip, it was also used for a dark thing where young adult Dexter is held the exact same like clamps for his flogging by Mandark.
Right. I mean, before we were made more aware of the reality of torture or participation in it in terms of a country, it was funny. It was funny.
True. You're right. Actually, that's what changed things about torture, that all of these are like right before 9/11 torture jokes.
They really made torture unfun for us.
Boo, boo. That's Dick Cheney's darkest legacy.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a good guy now, I've been told. Anyway.
He saved democracy just in time for it to fall apart again.
It was worth it. Okay. Bubbles, though, she is not giving Mojo what he wants.
Now that I have you, my sweet little Bubbles, nothing can stop my plan to take over the world!
What plan?
I'll tell you. I plan to zap you with my laser, causing you to cry out just like a little baby, which in turn will cause your sisters to come flying to your rescue, for which I am well prepared, as you can see. And with you three do-gooders out of the way, no one will be able to stop me!
That's the dumbest plan I've ever heard, and I'm not a baby!
Well, we'll see about that! Doodle brain! That's it! I've had it with your sassy mouth! I didn't want to do this! Well, actually I did.
And he turns it to 11 as well, with a bunch of flashing lights that I had to double check. Like, this aired just a few months after the Pokemon Shock incident made national headlines.
I guess we weren't as worried about it over here. I think it's the next episode that has a lot of the strobing effects. Or maybe it was one I watched on my own.
I mean, there's strobing in most of the episodes because they love their white light flashes, but this is like every shot of Mojo saying, yes, yes, like it's white flashing strobe effect, and then you have the strobing effect on Bubbles while also she's covered in a green laser too. The screaming, the doo-doo brain, like I'm not a baby, like all done so well. This would have been a hard day for the actress on this. And the screaming, Mojo thinks she's going to cry out, but actually it gives her the adrenaline rush to break the bonds and beat the shit out of Mojo JoJo.
Yeah, a lot of really quick cuts. You see that she has laser eyes too. And I love when the girls come in. It's a very funny shot from their POV. You see Mojo. He's just turned away from them and on the ground with his cape draped over him.
Yes. Oh, God. The way he falls over and the cape is draped over him in the fall. I mean, Mojo as well, a key to his character design is he has a giant brain, but it's an exposed brain that he covers with his helmet. So when the brain jar is broken by getting beat up, his brain is exposed. It's always great to see too. And yeah, he's dead on the ground. Now the sisters have more respect for Bubbles as we reach our sweet and then violent finale.
Bubbles! What? We heard you scream! Whoa! Wow, Bubbles! I can't believe you defeated Mojo all by yourself! You really whooped him! And look, she took the laser all the way to 11! Whoa! Man, Bubbles, we really underestimated you. And you know what? What? You're hardcore! Really? Oh, shucks. And girls, I'm sorry for running off. Mojo would never have gotten me if I had you two to look out for me. Team! Yeah!
Oh, Bubbles, you're so cute when you're all tough like that. So once again, the day is saved thanks to the Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah, I did say that the show can get a bit formulaic because of the opening and the ending always being the same, but they find ways to play around with it. And it's just fun to hear Tom Kenny as the smug, self-satisfied announcer who's always like kind of chuckling at his own jokes.
Kenny, I think, brings a lot of special stuff to this announcer that when originally written, it was kind of I don't want to say too vanilla, but even in the Whoop Ass Stew original short where Craig McCracken is being the narrator, it definitely was just the straight ahead, Super Friends narrator, like the classic style. Kenny does bring a lot of extra, gumption to it, I think.
Yeah, the narrator kind of has a point of view and a personality. He's not just like the stern authority telling you what's happening next.
Some of my favorite jokes of him that I just saw in my watching was, if it takes a while for him to get a line in the episode, he'll be like, hey, it's finally my turn. Meanwhile, or he complains if somebody else says the lines like, hey, that's my job, buddy. Though I'm glad we got a classic vanilla The Day Is Saved over for one of these with the same lovable shot of the girls with, those expanding hearts. Again, very, very 70s, very, very like post hippie era.
Yeah, the color cycling with those is so hypnotic. It's a very simple effect, but I just love how that's always the end of every cartoon. And they also play with that as well, like I said.
Oh, and I love the multiple zoom-ins on Bubbles as Mojo realizes he screwed up. And, this is also the confidence of silence. Other cartoons, and I kept expecting it, I'd be like, oh, Mojo's going to say like, uh-oh, or whatever. No, it's a silent reaction. Makes it much funnier. And also what's funny, too, my last thought on that episode is that when they go to the day is saved, Bubbles does not finish beating up Mojo. You don't know when she stops punching him.
That's true. There's no Professor Utonium to say, plead for mercy.
Yeah, nobody's holding her back this time.
Beg for some kind of sanity.
Okay, now it's time for the second half of this, which is the bear facts, which I'm glad this is the combo with it because I like that it is both like it's a Rashomon and also an excuse to play with a bunch, like really 4 different animation styles for the mayor and then all 3 of the girls.
One of the animation styles is nothing, darkness.
Yes. Yeah.
In fact, I had to download these. And I was skimming around in the file, and I thought, oh, man, this file is totally busted. I hear the dialogue. I can't see anything. And then I decided to play it through just to see at what point the file messes up. No, intentional. There's about 90 seconds of complete blackness or more?
Yeah, I timed it too. I believe it is 90. It's nuts how long. I wish there were commentaries on all these. In my research, I could not see if that was really like they went over budget on one episode, so they come up with an episode that's like pure blackness and then also a lot of stills as well in this. So even when there are things on screen, there is very limited animation as an excuse in both Bubbles and Buttercup's versions of the stories.
But to do POV is very ambitious, especially with this art style where everything's very cubist.
Yeah, they hide the edits in the POV first-person stuff very well from the mayor's viewpoint. And I'm glad we got this one, too, because it really lets us luxuriate in the character of Mr. Mayor, who we only briefly saw in the first episode.
We really get in his head, literally.
This is storyboarded by Cindy Morrow. She's the only boarder to have worked on all 6 seasons of the original series. Writer and boarder on a ton of things, Billy and Mandy, Teenage Robot, Chowder, Flapjack. And also, it looks like about 15 years ago, one of her biggest jobs has been working on the story segments of all of the Little Big Planet or Sackboy games. Like she has a writing credit on all of those.
Well, I can't play those games, but hey, the money must be good. I'm sure she does great work there.
Actually, aren't those getting taken offline soon? So you couldn't play them if you wanted to.
I don't know. I mean, they're whimsical, they're harmless, but they spent so much time trying to make Sackboy into a thing. It just didn't work, and those games they're just not fun to control. I understand the creativity involved in making a level, but then Mario Maker came along, and you're like, wow, I can make levels and they control like Mario levels. I don't have time, but other people do.
In that era, British coworkers tried to make me give a shit about Sackboy, and I refused to. And now we finally have. Sony has a Sackboy that actually is much more likable and stars in really good video games, Astrobot.
And I'm sure Sackboy shows up in that game a lot too, right?
I mean, yeah,
he has
because
to.
all the mascots are there, but yes. Sadly, you do have to deal with some sack in there, but Astrobots is really great. Game of the year, mileage may vary, but it was very good. But also, Cindy Morrow is married to fellow Powerpuff Girls and Dexter alum who worked on pretty much all of the classic episodes of those. Clayton Morrow.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. This is directed by John McIntyre, who he as well was a Critic employee. That was the one when you mentioned the Critic earlier. I was like, oh, he also worked on the Critic. He was a timer on the Critic as well in the first season.
Maybe with Gendy. I want to feel like they were there together before they broke out.
Yeah, I bet they came as a combo. Yeah. He worked on Nick for a little while after the Critic Nickelodeon shows, but then moved over to Cartoon Network with Johnny Bravo. He'd be on Dexter in the later seasons, stuck around with this crew, and is mostly stuck to TV ever since. He did a lot of work on Adventure Time up to the recent, last few years seasons of Ben 10. Ben 10 came back as well in a reboot series, likely for the same reason of selling new toys.
It's so great to have been too old for something, and then you also live through the reboot.
That's a real marker of time of hey, do you remember to have adults say remember Ben 10 growing up? And you're like, oh no.
I was 22.
Yes. I remember reading the comics of all the creators of Ben 10 years before you were born. Like, that's how I feel now.
I've seen a lot of memes online where it's like comparing childhood to adulthood. They're like, remember Minecraft? Wasn't it so much fun? It's like, I played Minecraft, but I was 30.
Isn't it going to be fun to go through that type of dialogue when the Minecraft movie comes out and that generation of people will be like, they didn't adapt this right about that movie?
They did not capture Steve the way I would have.
I mean, I never imagined that Steve was like a man in his 50s. I didn't think of him as that either. But I've never really thought about Steve, I don't think. But yes, this episode begins with the mayor doing the opening narration as he starts his day.
The city of Townsville is entirely mine. I love this job. There's just so much to love about being the mayor. Meeting new people, visiting exotic places, soaring to new heights. And I love my office. I love my phone. Hello, this is the mayor. I'd like to order a pizza. Put it on my tab. I love the power. Ah, my wife. I love my pen. And I just love the responsibility and the active decision-making that comes with being one man in charge of an entire city. Miss Bellum, what am I supposed to do?
Good morning, Mayor. Well, you can start by signing some very important documents on your desk.
Only in isolated audio can I really appreciate the gag that it's a dial tone when he's talking into the phone. He's not talking to anybody to order that pizza.
He's doing a little gag. He's like, I can do this if I want to.
And the limit of abusing power for him is getting a pizza for essentially free by putting it on his tab.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great manic, high-energy Tom Kenny performance.
The bit of him holding the pen and the photo of his wife in his hand and then saying, I love my pen. And his wife does appear in other episodes of the series. I don't think she ever speaks, at least in classic episodes.
It's great that in cartoon form, classic cartoon form, it's just a clone of him, but as a woman.
Take away the mustache, put on a dress. Same deal. In general, I love the design of the Mr. Mayor. Like, he is such a cute little guy. Like, he usually, some of my favorite little drawings of him is him being like picked up and moved around by Miss Bellum.
He's just the Monopoly guy, right?
That is exactly who he is.
Yes.
Yeah. They said that in the thing, too. They're like, look, he's a Monopoly guy, plus maybe it was the Wizard of Oz they mentioned, but that was a good point you had, Bob.
And for your sticklers out there, I know he's Uncle Pennybags.
Oh, yes, that's right. Thank you, Bob. I failed there remembering his name. His bit about having to be told to spell his own name, which isn't his name, it's just Mayor. Then he doesn't know how to spell that. And also that on the back of the new law is where he was drawing himself as a big buff guy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he can't read the words important new law or whatever is written on the front of the document. It's like Beavis or Butthead reading.
And then as he's trying to write his name, then crash, a noise, he turns. A great stupid line, what's all that glass doing on the floor? He doesn't realize what's happening.
He doesn't understand cause and effect.
He sees Mojo, he gets bashed in the head and goes unconscious, still not really realizing what's happening here. And yes, then he wakes up to pure blackness, and it's 90 seconds. It's nuts. They got away with putting that on TV. That, again, it's like, just like the violence, I feel like you couldn't do that on TV now for whatever airs on Cartoon Network because it would make people change the channel.
Yeah, I think even at the time, they would think, oh, people might think their TVs are broken. Duckman, we covered a Duckman episode a long time ago. I think it was called About Face, in which he goes out to eat with a very lovely but also extremely ugly woman, and he turns off all the lights in the restaurant, and the entire scene is in darkness, but occasionally they pan over to where there is a single light in the background just to let you know your TV is working.
Right. I forgot that pan. Speaking of what's on Cartoon Network and people changing channels, on my most recent time I was in a hotel room, that's when I turn on cable TV, and we put on Cartoon Network pretty much the entire time just as like background TV noise. And in the daytime, it was only Teen Titans Go, and at nighttime on Adult Swim, it was basically 2 hours of American Dad and then the regular Adult Swim staples.
Wow, at least they have a programming block. That's not just a marathon. I'll give them credit for that.
It's a mini marathon of American Dad and then other episodes. So I think, too, it's where it's the dumping ground for American Dad new stuff as TBS becomes nothing.
Interesting. I didn't know that's what was happening there. We covered some Talking Simpsons recently, and I'm sure we sound very old by just being surprised by what's on cable television, but We were talking about BattleBots, and I thought, what's on Comedy Central now? Oh, 14 hours of Seinfeld. Very good.
Yeah, Cartoon Network was... I think they were using it as the excuse of, we're almost at the 400th episode of Teen Titans Go. So it's a Teen Titans Go marathon of every episode in order. But I don't think that's too different from a regular day of Cartoon Network programming.
I think they're trying to fool you into thinking you are watching a streaming network.
I think definitely they're getting into this on Disney Plus, where they just have like streaming channel now. They just do of like, I definitely saw that for their holiday collection on Disney Plus of like, just see what things on here right now, treating it like it's a channel. Anyway, back to here. We wake up with the mayor. He doesn't know what's going on, and Mojo impatiently explains it to him. And listeners out there, close your eyes wherever you are, and you can reenact this entire scene.
But not if you're driving.
Oh, shut up already!
Who's that? Is that you, Mommy?
No, dummy, it's me, the evil Mojo JoJo. I blindfolded and tied you up in order to keep the whereabouts of my secret lair a secret.
No, you mean the observatory on the top of the volcano in the middle of Townsville Central Park?
Oh, shut up, I say! I say shut up because I am going to become powerful. But before I can become powerful, I must be taken seriously. And the only way to be taken seriously is to rule the city of Townsville as the mayor! But in order for me to become mayor, you cannot be mayor. And that is why I had to strip you of your...
Not so fast! Mojo JoJo!
Powerpuff Girls! Ooh, take this!
Ow! That's it, Mojo. Now you're gonna get it. Let's get the mayor. Are you okay, Mayor? Yeah. Are you okay?
What's so funny?
Nothing. Come on.
What's so funny is male nudity.
He's hanging dong this entire time. I listened to it there. It makes it 10 times funnier, their explanation that what you just heard of Mojo and them fighting is 10 seconds tops of like, you even hear him go, wow, which is probably the Bruce Lee is with his nunchucks.
Yeah, it's as short as any fight scene, but you don't see any part of it right now.
And it will take minutes to explain the entire fight scene. Also, him replacing the mayor, the very next episode is when Fuzzy Lumpkins, he does become the mayor in the episode Impeach Fuzz. So they're playing around with this. But yes, Mojo has stripped him, and we figure out that later. But that's why the girls are laughing. The mayor is nude for the rest of the episode, which is why they do it in his perspective the entire time. And also why the girls keep breaking eye contact with them, because it's very uncomfortable for them.
Yes.
And they fly away. They take a blindfold off him. And you know what? It would have been nice for them to give him like a towel or something. They didn't have to keep giggling.
Yeah. I mean, I guess he's in the safety of his office now, but this is going to get out.
And this is where they take it to the next level of this episode, that it's a Rashomon about a thing that just happened. Like, that's also such a clever idea. It's not just like everybody has a different opinion of what happened, but it just happened.
And then in 3 different art styles, you see different perspectives.
Here's them beginning their story.
Why were you all laughing?
Well, you don't want to hear it. It's such a long story. Yeah, long story.
I got time.
Well, you see, it goes like this. We were all at school. I was drawing a pretty picture of a red daisy, but then Blossom came along and said that the red daisy was genetically impossible. So then I made the yellow one, but I really like the red one. Maybe I should have just made 2 flowers, one red and one...
Bubbles! The mayor doesn't want to hear about your stupid baby stories. He just wants to know the bare facts. Who cares about a dumb old flower anyway? Mayor, I'll tell you what really happened. See,
I was at school, brushing up on my conversational Chinese, when all of a sudden, my hotline phone rang. I knew there was trouble, and I had to act fast. I rushed to the phone.
Why is everything always about you? We were there too.
Yeah, and I was drawing a very important picture. Although now I can't remember if it was a yellow flower or a pink flower. Hey, Blossom, do you remember what color it... Anyway...
So Bubbles' perspective is in the form of these very cute crayon drawings that are animated, which probably took a lot of work to make convincingly crude. And then Blossom, it's the typical animation style, but everything is cast in red and pink hues. And the Bubbles style is very cute and very cool to see, just like the roughness of the crayon drawings. They did something similar in Dexter's Lab. I'm not sure if you ever saw the episode that was fully written by a 6-year-old fan who also did all the voices.
Right. Oh, thank you. Yes, I do remember it now. Yeah.
Most of the entire script was him going, Dee Dee, you are so stupid. You are so stupid, stupid, stupid. Just like I think there were maybe 300 stupids in that episode. It's something a friend and I would quote to each other a lot.
And you know what else? You're stupid. Yes. You're right. It's similar to that. Bubbles with her crayons is always adorable, but this version of her events, like, it's also funny this comes right after Bubblevicious because she is so childlike in this one after wanting to be hardcore in the previous episode.
The hardcoreness kind of faded away.
I also love, they express so much with Blossom's personality in this that, like, it's only her in the story. She says, my hotline, I got up to do this. The other girls are not even appearing in it. It shows her kind of selfishness, or, well, that's maybe too extreme, but her personal focus.
Yeah, the two other girls are mentioned in passing, and then when you see them on the screen, they're very tiny compared to Blossom, who's just right in the foreground.
That's right. After Buttercup tells her we were there too, he's like, oh, and Buttercup and Bubbles were there too, I guess. Anyway, and then it gets back to her story. I mean, that's Blossom thinks that she could do it all herself too, and she is the buzzkill character who's just like, no, think of the plans. Like everybody do what I say. That's she has the very older sister vibe, but they still find fun things to do with her. It's hard, not everybody wants to Cyclops or Leonardo or Optimus Prime. They don't always get to be the fun one too. In the years since, they found ways to make Leonardo and Cyclops fun. That was the main point of X-Men 97 was, Cyclops is cool.
Well, I guess when you name someone as the leader in your theme song, they have automatically become not fun.
The ending theme is very similar to Leonardo Lee's for Blossom. They then are explaining what happened some more. They say that, he's no spring chicken. Yeah, he's no chicken. And the mayor is getting really tired of all of this. And there's also a bit of them having to explain to the mayor is too stupid to know he's too stupid to write speeches.
Mr. Mayor, you had written an elaborate note telling Miss Bellum that you'd gone home to write your election speech.
I did? How smart of me!
That's not what I mean. See, you didn't actually write the note.
But you just said I wrote the note.
Miss Bellum said that you couldn't have possibly written the note because she writes all of your speeches.
Miss Bellum wrote the note?
No! Neither you nor Miss Bellum wrote the note!
Then who wrote the note? I'm sorry, Blossom, but this is all terribly confusing.
I knew that there was only one evil, menacing character cunning enough to do this. Mojo JoJo!
Mojo JoJo?
Yes!
Mojo JoJo wrote my speech? I'll have to thank him.
Mojo wrote the note! Mojo wrote the note! We got to the observatory, busted in, beat up Mojo, rescued you, and here we are! Can we go home now?
Buttercup, there's more to the story than that.
Why were you laughing so much? My life was at stake. I don't see what was so funny.
Well, I'm trying to get to that, Mayor. If Buttercup would just butt out and let me tell the story.
They keep saying butt out, and not just the bear facts earlier, which was the name of the episode, but they keep, the mayor's butt is out.
We're going to see his butt out at the end. It's the big reveal.
They're all trying to get control of the story. I do like how Buttercup just can't take it anymore and just starts screaming like, then I did this and it's over. Okay, let's get out of here.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of all the screaming. We talked about how much I love screaming in these 90s cartoons, and we're at the tail end of characters just shouting at each other, saying, shut up, stupid.
I really like Buttercup's style, too, of storytelling, because it is just like basically a slideshow with extremely limited animation in a couple places, though the dark coloring, that's perfect for it. It has so much energy to it.
Yeah, it does remind me of Samurai Jack, obviously, and also like Frank Miller and Mike Mignola, where so much stuff is defined by negative space.
Yeah. I bet they're definitely pulling from Frank Miller's Sin City was very hot at the time in the mid 90s. And the animation style too, it reminds me of the earliest 60s cartoons like the Marvel ones that were essentially just slideshows of panels, which is what this is too with Mojo. And they then, as they're explaining what they did, Blossom cares about being in the correct formation while Bubbles just cares about that they're all friends flying around. And she starts describing the clouds. And then we get to see Blossom's plan, which is like a blueprint of the big building that Mojo's in, which is a really cool, I love his base. It's a really cool design.
Yeah, we were inside of it earlier, but it is an observatory on the top of a volcano in the middle of the Central Park.
Yeah, it's like right in the center of it. That's where I got that, the first clip of Mojo I played in the history section. That's from an episode that is all focused on Mojo, and it's like how his day works, and it's him leaving his home to go and buy eggs, and you get to see that he's just in this giant, scary observatory that's right in the middle of Central Park. The fight starts from all their different tellings. They bust in. I also like that it reminded me, too, of the Marvel cartoons Buttercup's version, because when he shoots the laser, there's a lot of the Kirby crackle all over it, the little black dots that define energy. Meanwhile, Bubbles is talking about how she feels bad. He's a sad widow monkey, and it is adorable. And then they all just start screaming like, oh, shut up. Like, this is like the 8th shut up in this. And like, I really don't think on Cartoon Network you're allowed to say shut up anymore.
No, I mean, maybe it's for the best, but a lot of characters are just like, shut up, stupid, in so many of these 90s cartoons.
I mean, hey, I definitely said shut up 8 million times as a child.
Oh, me too.
And cartoons taught me to.
Shut up, stupid was my catchphrase as a kid.
Shut up. Well, why don't you shut up? I think that was done really good on Saturday Morning All-Star Hits, their anti-shut up episode.
Oh,
was
right.
One of the best of it.
Yes. No wonder I'm thinking of that.
Where they called it S up, and like stop saying shut up was the just say no to saying shut up. That's what I say it all the time. Watch Saturday Morning All-Star Hits if you haven't yet. Smash is the best.
Yeah, before it possibly goes away. Netflix owns it. Who knows what they do with things.
We're lucky to have it still live, honestly, in this fiscal year. All of the action is happening. Bubbles wants to kiss his boo-boo. They can't take it anymore. As also Blossom having a real brain fart. She can't remember the word for nunchucks, ninja thingies, and she can speak conversational Chinese.
I like that Buttercup calls them nunchucks.
Oh, yeah, it's true. Yeah. Is that an actor choice, or did they think that it was nunchucks back then?
I don't know. I've heard both, but usually, like in older things, I will hear nunchucks and not nunchucks, N-U-N.
Though also I wonder if it is, I mean, you and I have both been studying some Japanese, and which is different language than Chinese and Chinese dialects. But
well, now you tell me. I thought I'd be able to use both.
But in Japanese, N and M can sometimes be interchangeable.
That is true, yeah. I guess you could, if you're saying the word in Japanese, you could stick an M in there and it'd be fine. So maybe there's no right answer, but there is a more accepted version.
I guess in the other case, it is the localizing of a foreign word into English.
Mm-hmm.
So what's fun here is I love the Bruce Lee poses on Mojo and in Buttercup's telling of it. And I also like as they are telling the story of the fight, they all start cutting in between their ways of it, because this is a Powerpuff Girls fight, so it has to have very quick cutting, but because it's a narrated fight, it's very quick cutting in between the different girls describing things.
Yeah, Bubbles' descriptions are normally very cutesy, but there is one of her little bits where it is a drawing of Mojo flying across the screen and just a stream of green puke is coming out of his mouth.
Yes. Yeah, I love it's like, oh, I didn't like that part. It's like, but I love it, just green puke everywhere. And also how she's like, I wanted to kiss his little boo-boo, but then I kicked him in the face. The fight keeps growing and growing and growing until we then get to hear the end of the fight, where basically Blossom has to cut the fight short because Buttercup wouldn't stop punching Mojo JoJo.
Yeah, there's a very funny shot where the battle is over and Buttercup is holding up Mojo by the cape. Buttercup is punching him over and over again.
And this is where the story is reaching its conclusion.
That's when I knew that it was up to me to save the day. I wasn't hit that hard. And what about me, huh? You drew the pretty picture, remember? Oh, yeah.
But what about all the laughing?
Now I was really mad. Mojo was gonna get it. Smash! Crush! I punched them!
And I gave him a good one of my own. I helped too. Buttercup was beating up Mojo pretty good, according to plan. Yeah, and there were some guts. Oh, I didn't like the guts. Yeah. I took Mojo into custody in order to keep Buttercup from beating him up, and deposited him in a safe place, and then saved you and raced back here. And then we took off your blindfold, and then you asked us, hey, what happened? And then I told you I was drawing a picture of a pretty flower, and then Blossom said,
You're telling the whole story all over again.
Sorry.
It's great. They are getting frustrated. Like, this has been a very circular episode of very limited places and limited shots, very limited animation overall.
Yeah, and just the back half all about telling a story.
all the telling the story, and every shot you see of the girls is the exact same one, which is such a clever use of, like, this is limited animation of Powerpuff Girls at its most limited by far, and it's done so well. I love every cut. I love also, even when Blossom is complimenting Buttercup for doing most of the fighting, she says, like, well, it was according to my plan. But, Blossom's still full of herself. And explaining all that took much longer than the 90 Seconds of Darkness, and us explaining it took even longer than them explaining it. So it's a real Ouroboros here.
Now the listener at home has to be naked for it to fully link up. So please take off your clothes, even if you're driving, pull over to the side of the road.
Both of these work, the closing your eyes and getting nude. I mean, yes, when the mayor is finally like, okay, seriously, what's going on? That's when the girls are like, oh, gotta go. And it's a great final shot. And I have the last clip here, but the final shot starts with what you think is still the mayor's perspective. And then it zooms out to show the mayor for the first time in the whole episode. This is back when Cartoon Network could show butts. I can't remember if this came up on actually recorded medium or if we did it chatting afterwards. But when we had on Matt Burnett, the co-creator of Craig of the Creek, he talked about how he boarded a Steven Universe in the first season that ends with, like, the final shot is also seeing Steven's butt. And it was like, he remarked that was one of the last times they could draw a cartoon butt in a Cartoon Network show.
2012, the butt gate slam closed. No more butts were allowed out.
I wonder how, I definitely have seen that if it is a clothed butt on Teen Titans, they draw butts all the time, to the extent that a popular toy of Robin is him twerking. Like, that's how much they draw butts.
Really? But you said they're clothed butts, right?
Yes, yeah. It's the Ren and Stimpy rule of they drew a butt and painted it green, basically. But when Steven Universe did it, it is the bare backside of the character, just like we see here with Mr. Mayor in our final clip of the episode.
Girls, that's all okie dokie, peachy keen, fine and dandy, but you never explained what was so gosh darn funny.
Whoa, look at the time.
Yeah, we gotta go. See you, Mayor. Bye.
Wait, why were you laughing? Why were you girls laughing?
Oh, Mayor. Looks like Mojo stripped you of even more than your power, but the girls couldn't bear to tell you the naked truth. So once again, the day is saved, thanks to the Powerpuff Girls. Mayor, you cheeky devil.
Working as much butt innuendo as possible in the end there.
All of that just to lead up to he's been naked the whole time. That's the joke. They've just been talking to the mayor nude, like Mojo stripped him naked, and he's just been sitting around naked.
He can't read or spell or realize he's naked in front of children. It's a real problem.
I have to think Cerebellum eventually tells him, like, hey, put on some pants. Like, otherwise he would just remain, if nobody dresses him, he always would be naked because he's too stupid to know any better. But yes, the silly little mayor, we get to end with his butt in it. It's a clever little ending that gives you a little giggle. And we go to the ending theme, which does also kind of follow the Dexter rule of, like, having a vocals version of it is a sung version of the credits instead of just like instrumental like it is for Dexter and Powerpuff Girls opening.
Right, yeah. The Dexter's Lab had operatic end theme, and then this one is I believe a Scottish rock band.
Yeah, they're a Scottish band called Biss, pronounced like this, which was helpful. That was listed on their Wikipedia page, just so I was sure.
I didn't know they were Scottish, but that explains some pronunciations in this. Like, instead of saying commander and the leader, she says commander on the leader.
Oh, yeah. Joy on the laughter.
Yeah.
Cannot imagine they have anything else that's famous in America other than this. When I looked at the list of their songs on their wiki page, I was like, I haven't heard of these at all. And I was listening to UK indie pop back then.
Yeah. I like this era of woman-driven power pop rock, whatever. It's very Jammer Lammy coded is what I want to say.
Biss, I bet, was played on at least one show with Belle and Sebastian.
Mm-hmm.
And they would even do a punk or a punker version of this song for the movie. They'd record a newer version of it for the film. And I think the kids liking this song is a reason why in 2000 they put out that CD of all of the indie bands on it. They're like, oh, I guess, indie pop rock is the sound of the Powerpuff Girls, so let's make a whole album of that. It's a fun song about how the Powerpuff Girls save the day. And on that album version, they did a whole 2-minute version of it too, if you want to listen to the extended mix or the one from the movie. They're all good. And then we end with the swirling star, just to let you know, the last thing that ever had that Hanna-Barbera logo on it.
It reminds you of a toilet flushing, which used to symbolize the content that preceded it. But now it's good stuff.
It is very fitting to see that after the Snorks and think of them going down the tubes. Yes. When I looked at the history of those Hanna-Barbera logos, they had stopped using it. Like, that logo went away. The Hanna-Barbera logo is the thing right before they started doing Cartoon Network Studios was just like, Fred Flintstone and George Jetson. It was like their faces in an oval. You remember those?
Yes, yeah.
But instead of using that or the relatively new Cartoon Network Studios logo, they went with the swirling star Hanna-Barbera thing, which I have to imagine is because that was the one used in Hanna-Barbera cartoons when Craig McCracken was ages 10 to 15.
Yeah, with all the 70s and 80s throwbacks in this, it does really match up with the content.
I'm glad it kept it alive, at least for one last generation of kids. When you watch the latest seasons of Powerpuff Girls, they get rid of that swirling star, and it's just the regular Cartoon Network Studios, ident, which is fun and all, but I miss the swirling star.
And now we can't even get that.
No, the idents is dead as the studio itself. But on happier news, hey, this was a great episode.
Yes, it was. Yeah, I don't think so. The last time I watched this show, I believe I was on a trip, probably for Retronauts or something like that, maybe even Talking Simpsons. My wife and I went out to a place for breakfast, and on one of the TVs, whatever network they had on, they were just showing 90s Powerpuff Girls, and there were no captions, I don't think. And there was no audio, but I just couldn't stop looking at it because, like I said, every time you pause the show, it is just something you could frame and put on your wall. And it's also very funny and has great characters, but I think the visual element is really what sells me on this and this entire era of programming because I miss it so dearly. And the new Clone High that nobody watched comes kind of close to approaching this, but you can tell they don't really have the resources that these people had. So I just dearly miss this era of content, and it was a fun trip back to the late 90s as we're like nearing the end of them pushing the UPA style and having so much fun and being given so much freedom.
With it now being 30 years since the first short debuted on Cartoon Network, it is sad to know that Powerpuff Girls is more than old enough to be shown on Boomerang. If that channel even exists anymore on cable packages, I don't know. What I do know is that this, yes, holds up so well. It is some of like the best like joke storytelling. Like another of our pals who we've had on the podcast before, Steve Yurko, he talked about how that Jewel of the Isle episode is one of his all-time favorites. As an animator, it was a big inspiration to him and then a whole generation of people. Like, it is not just that it is a fun show to watch, but if you care about the art of cartooning and telling jokes in, board-driven format, there's so much you can learn the deeper you dig into it. And it holds up spectacularly well. And when they try to bring it back, you see what's missing. You didn't know it was there, the secret chemical X that was in the original one. But when you see a version of it without it and the Pretenders to the Throne, you can recognize it in its absence.
Yeah, going back, I appreciate it more than ever. This is a show I only watched probably a few years before moving on, but now I'm glad it's pretty accessible.
And this won't be the last time we cover Powerpuff Girls, I'm sure of that. But I'm glad we finally, yes, as you said, we're wrapping up our 7th year of What a Cartoon, right?
Yes.
We're finally getting to it.
Sorry it took so long, everybody. But this has been another episode of What a Cartoon. Thank you so much for listening. If you are not a supporter and you want to support us, we have a lot of things that you would like, including ad-free shows you get a week early, but also over 200 full-length bonus episodes covering things like Futurama, King of the Hill, Mission Hill, Batman, the Animated Series, and The Critic. And that's all happening at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons at the $5 level. Just sign up for $5 a month and you'll get everything we made on the Patreon for almost 7.5 years now. That is so much stuff. Like I said earlier, over 200 full-length episodes. If you like hearing us talk about cartoons, there are so many conversations you have not heard if you're not a patron at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. And there is a $10 level as well. When you sign up for that, you can access all of the $5 stuff naturally, but then there is also one mega long podcast once a month only for patrons at that level. What's going on there, Henry?
Bob's talking about the What a Cartoon Movie podcast, which is more like 3 podcasts in one. If you're listening to this on the free feed, then you have heard us talking about Snow White and the 7 Dwarves, a little taste of the history, but you can only hear the full podcast and all the previous ones we've done over 6 years of if you subscribe at the $10 level at patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. I mean, you just heard us talk a ton about other animated movies we've covered on here that are related to Powerpuff Girls. I definitely think a great follow-up to this one would be listening to our one on Dexter's Laboratory Ego Trip, which is done by basically the staff of Powerpuff Girls while they were working on it. And it is a true classic as well. And that's just one of over 70 What a Cartoon movies we have covered. Our longest one ever, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, 6.5 hours, most of them between 5 and 6 hours long. We've covered all the Disney Renaissance, a bunch of Disney classics. The Project A-ko I talked about, we covered that too. So much there. You need to check it out. And all the ad-free $5 stuff too. Sign up at patreon.com/Talking Simpsons.
And I've been one of your hosts, Bob Mackey. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky as Bob Servo. My other podcast is Retronauts. That's a classic gaming podcast all about old video games. You can find that wherever you find podcasts or go to patreon.com/Retronauts and sign up there for 2 full-length bonus episodes every month. And Henry, how about you?
I remain HENEREYG on Twitter. But of course, if you're in the more fun place of Blue Sky, that's where I'm Talking Henry. And that's also my handle on Instagram. Check out all the fun things I am posting about on those services. And also, if you're following me and Bob on social media, you gotta follow at Talk Simpsons Pod, whether on Instagram, Blue Sky, or Twitter, because at Talk Simpsons Pod keeps you in the loop whenever new podcasts come out, whenever we have cool new plans for the new year, if we have a live show going on, or any other fun things, you know about it if you follow at Talk Simpsons Pod in all those places. And if you need a list of all of our previously released free podcasts, you can always check out TalkingSimpsons.com.
Thanks so much for listening, folks. We'll see you again next time for an extended free preview of our latest episode of What a Cartoon Movie, all about how to train your dragon, and we'll see you then.
You see, Bubbles, you're not ready for the higher levels yet. Oh, don't worry. Cheer up. Someday you will be.
It's not fair.
She's so cute when she's all pouty like that.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to paint their door a vibrant shade of blue. Others have the need to decorate their bathroom with fish, anchors, and other nautical items. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.